Chapter 2177. After picking the wild vegetables and fruits, Likeshu hesitated for a moment. How do we catch small animals? And how do we catch fish? I'll make a fork to catch fish. This time, Likeshu was the one watching. She watched as Tangwa used the knife to cut a small wooden branch and sharpen the tip. The tip was in the shape of a fork. Then, the two of them went to the beach to catch fish. After grabbing for a while, Tangwa finally forked 2 fish. Calmly Keshu heaved a sigh of relief. She kept complaining in her heart. She could have rented a cruise ship, but why couldn't she just barbecue meat on the cruise ship? Why did she have to suffer here and experience primitive life? She got dirty all over. Of course, Likeshu looked kind on the surface. When she saw Tangwa forking the fish, she happily praised Tangwa for being amazing. As expected of her daughter. Tangwa smiled without saying a word and put the fish back. I saw crabs and prawns in the puddles just now. Likeshu gritted her teeth. Then let's go catch them. We have to make some ropes with grass. Otherwise, we won't have a place to put them. Likeshu thought about it. That was really the case. At this time, there was no time to make any containers. For the time being, they couldn't find any materials to make baskets. Making ropes with grass and tying up the crabs and prawns was indeed a way. Likeshu muttered in her heart. She didn't know where this brat got such a wicked idea. She thought that Tangwa didn't enjoy the childhood life with her mother. Now, she wanted to experience it. She heard that some people who had money would reminisce about the past to make up for the past. When she was making the rope, Likeshu's fingers were cut a few times by the grass. Tangwa said with concern, I know some herbs to stop bleeding. I'll get some for you. After a while, Tangwa found some herbs to stop bleeding and handed it to Likeshu. Chew it yourself and apply it to the wound. Likeshu was unwilling to use such a simple method. But thinking of the relationship between the two of them, she took it with a smile and even said against her will that Tangwa was very sensible. Tangwa looked at her with a pair of sparkling eyes. Likeshu put the herbs into her mouth and chewed. The bitter taste almost made her retch. Finally, he applied it to his finger. There was indeed a cooling sensation, and there was no more bleeding. The system's heart trembled as it looked at these, if it really had a heart. Dear host, this is bad. Given the current situation, when no one knew the truth, who knew what she was thinking? This woman is so evil. He could already imagine how desperately Keshu would be when the time came. After the rope was made, the two of them went to the puddles to look for crabs and prawns. He looked at Likeshu's hand and said, You have a wound on your hand. Just watch me do it now. It's the same. All right. Likeshu agreed. Right now, she really didn't want to bend down and dig for things in the mud. It wasn't fun at all. Right now, she just wanted to get rid of Tangwa as soon as possible and leave with the 500,000 yuan. But for the sake of the future, she had to endure all of this. Tangwa's hands and feet were very nimble, and her eyes were very accurate. In a short while, she caught several crabs and 4 prawns. The crabs and prawns were tied up by the rope she made earlier, and they couldn't struggle on the ground. In the end, I think we need to get a pheasant or a rabbit. It would be better if there were wild mushrooms. I want to chat with more like-minded people about transmigration, female supporting character, calm down. Talking about life, looking for confidence peak. Chapter 2178. Likeshu followed Tangwa into the forest. After walking for about half an hour, they finally found traces of pheasants. Under Likeshu's incredulous gaze, Tangwa successfully caught a pheasant with the bow and arrow that she had just made. When they came back, they found edible wild mushrooms. You can't eat those with bright colors. These things usually grow in damp places and after rain, Tangwa said to Likeshu as she picked the wild mushrooms. Likeshu smiled lovingly. Xiaogua knows so much. Mom doesn't even know about these things. Mom can only eat the ready-made food today. www.com. Tangwa smiled. It's okay. There probably won't be such a chance in the future. Likeshu thought that Tangwa would not bring her to such a place in the future to have a barbecue with local ingredients. This kind of experience, once was enough. It was really tiring. The two of them returned to their original spot. Tangwa used a stone slab to set up a barbecue rack. Likeshu finally heaved a sigh of relief. It was time to eat, right? On the way back, Tangwa also picked some seasonings. Although it was very simple, Likeshu thought that this kind of thing would not happen in the future, so she did not mind. After a while, Likeshu saw that Tangwa was sitting by the barbecue rack without moving. She was a little puzzled. What's wrong? Shouldn't we be barbecuing now? I didn't bring a fire, Tangwa glanced at her and said. Likeshu was stunned. Then let's not barbecue. Let's go back. We already have the ingredients. It's a pity to give up. This is an unforgettable experience. Likeshu frowned. Then what should we do? I have an idea. Why don't we drill wood to start a fire? What? Drill wood to start a fire. How long would that take? Tangwa looked up at the sun in the sky. The weather is good today. There are a lot of dry leaves around. It shouldn't take long to start a fire with bricks and wood. What else could Likeshu do? She could only agree. In the end, Tangwa used an hour to drill wood to start a fire. Seeing the leaves burning and the meat being roasted, Likeshu finally breathed a sigh of relief. She really wanted to leave this damned place as soon as possible. If she didn't leave now, she didn't know what this brat would come up with. She might even plan to spend the night here. Of course, things were not over yet. When Tangwa was about to make wild chicken and mushroom soup, she said that there was no fresh water around, so she could not make it. In the end, under Likeshu's indescribable gaze, she began to distill the seawater again. Likeshu even asked her to watch from the side seriously. For this time, Likeshu only wanted to say that she had bought a watch last year. After leaving this place, she would never participate in any outdoor activities in the future. After the seawater was distilled, there were no more problems. www.com. The meat was roasted, and so was the wild chicken and mushroom soup. Because he used a stone pot. The stone pot was a stone that Tangwa picked up. It just happened to look like a stone pot. Of course, food without seasoning would not taste as good as in restaurants. But it wasn't bad. It was something natural in the wild, and it did taste a little fragrant. Speaking of the wild chicken and mushroom soup, Likeshu really ate a lot. Just when Likeshu said that she wanted to go back, Tangwa interrupted her. Why don't you spend the night here? Likeshu wanted to refute, but in the end, she didn't. Then, Tangwa brought her to build a shelter for the night. I want to chat with more like-minded people about. Chapter 2179. When the sun set, the two of them went back to their respective shacks. Web computer, www.com. Likeshu lay down in the shabby shack with the hope that everything would be fine after tonight. Even if she was not sleepy, she closed her eyes tightly. How could she let herself fall asleep? She believed that when she woke up, she would definitely be able to bring back the 500,000 yuan. That 500,000 yuan was still under her head. After all, it was safer to keep the money by her side. Who knew if that brat Tang Guo would go back on her word? Li Keshu did not know that the moment she fell asleep, Tang Guo's figure disappeared from the shack. Calm on the deserted island, only Li Keshu was left. When Tang Guo returned home, the first thing she did was to take a shower and change into clean clothes. Then, she looked at the time. It was almost dawn. However, there was no activity today. She lay down and prepared to sleep for a while. She slept until noon. It was Shang Jin's call that woke her up. Let's eat. Tang Guo's hazy eyes suddenly became clear. Okay, I'll be right there. Tang Guo did not check on Li Keshu. There was no other way. With the current ability of the system, it could not cover Li Keshu's current location. However, according to the time, Li Keshu should still be sleeping. Perhaps it was almost dawn there. Anyway, Li Keshu would not be able to come back in this lifetime. She did not want to care about what would happen to Li Keshu in the future. She had already taught her so many survival skills. She should be able to survive on that island safely. As an adult, she should not always think about eating ready-made food. Shang Jin noticed that Tang Guo looked a little tired, especially under her eyes. You didn't rest well. He touched Tang Guo's eye bags and frowned. Yes, I kept dreaming last night. System, what a joke. You were clearly tormenting Li Keshu. What dream? Even if you were dreaming, you were tormenting Li Keshu in your dream. After lunch, Tang Guo was pushed into the room by Shang Jin. Shang Jin asked her to lie on the bed and put an eye mask on her. In front of her eyes was darkness. Not long after, the hypnotic piano music reached her ears, making her drowsy. So little brother's piano music can even hypnotize people. I thought it only made people want to fall in love. Like it? I like it. I've always liked it. As long as it's you, I'll like it. Tang Guo said with a smile. Although she was very sleepy, she still wanted to talk for a while. If I could listen to little brother playing the piano every day, I would definitely be very happy. Why don't you help me record a few songs? The sound of the piano suddenly stopped. Just when Tang Guo thought that something had happened, it started again. But this time, it was not the hypnotic song from before, but a piano song about marriage. When the beautiful and sweet music reached their ears, it made them feel as if they were getting married. Shang Jin's voice came to Tang Guo's ears along with the song. Guo, marry me. Okay. Tang Guo. System. When you get married, you can listen to it every day. You don't have to record it. Shang Jin added, his fingers still not stopping. Tang Guo took off her eye mask and looked at Shang Jin's back. She smiled and said, say it again. I didn't hear it clearly just now. Guo, marry me. Shang Jin was naturally nervous. Otherwise, with his standard, how could he make people hear that the song seemed to be trembling? Okay, then let's get married. I want to chat with more like-minded people about. Chapter 2180. Tang Guo and Shang Jin had gotten married. This was what everyone had expected. Those who knew them all thought that the two of them were a perfect match. In this world, there was no one else other than the two of them who was more compatible with each other. Their wedding was very grand. Their classmates from primary school to master's degree came to attend. Seeing that the couple had finally gotten married, they actually heaved a sigh of relief. It turned out that unknowingly, they had been a couple for so many years. On the day of their wedding, the busy Tang Ran put down everything in her hands. Naturally, Wen Imo also came. Seeing that the two of them had gotten married, Wen Imo shed tears of envy. He secretly glanced at Tang Ran, who was crying happily. He didn't know when he would be able to marry Ran Ran. Actually, when I was very young, my sister hooked up with Shang Jin, who lived opposite us. I had a premonition that they would be together, Tang Ran said excitedly. I've been waiting for this day for too long. Not only was Tang Ran excited, but everyone present was as well. Seeing how Tang Gua and Shang Jin interacted with each other, they always forgot the troubles in life. Listening to Shang Jin's piano music made their hearts feel warm. They always felt like they were in love. Even if their hearts were hurt or tired, listening to it could heal them. There were also videos on the internet of Tang Gua giving Shang Jin a rose after every performance. Although it was the same every time, these two people were never tired of watching. They could watch the same action 100 times, 1,000 times, or even 10,000 times. After getting married, Tang Gua moved to Shang Jin's villa. Just as Shang Jin said, there were many times when she fell asleep listening to Shang Jin's piano music. System, there were many times when it wasn't. Don't ask him when it was. Everyone should know. This time, Li Keshu was woken up by the sun. When she opened her eyes, she realized that the sun was already high in the sky. She didn't have a watch or a phone, so she didn't know what time it was. But looking at the height of the sun, it should be a little past noon. She hurriedly went to the safe and opened it. Seeing that the 500,000 yuan was still there, she heaved a sigh of relief. She came out of the simple shed and did not find Tang Gua around. She thought that since she had slept so late, perhaps Tang Gua was still sleeping. She walked out of the shed and looked inside. There was no one inside. Her heart skipped a beat. She did not look carefully and thought that Tang Gua might have gone to look for food. This brat is really addicted to surviving in the wild. The sun was very bright. Li Keshu didn't want to wander around outside, so she returned to the shed to lie down. Because there were banana leaves inside, it was cool and comfortable to lie down. He didn't know how long he had been lying there, and the sun had also moved down a lot. Li Keshu felt that something was wrong. She quickly went out to look for Tang Gua. It wasn't until the sun had set and red clouds appeared on the horizon that Li Keshu returned, exhausted and pale. She shouted, "Stupid girl, where the hell did you go?" She went into Tang Gua's shed like a madwoman. This time, she found that there were things inside. There were 2 safes, a fruit knife that Tang Gua had used before, and a note. This time, she first looked at the note. There were very few words on it. "I've already taught you what I should teach you. Live well. I think 500,000 yuan is too little, so I'll give you another 500,000 yuan. The knife is blunt. I'll just leave it to you. You can still use it if you find a whetstone." Seeing this, Li Keshu finally broke down and shouted. She scattered the money in the safe everywhere and cursed all kinds of things. Internet computer, www.com. When she was tired, she lay down in the shed. At first, she thought of a way to leave this place. Later, she found that she couldn't leave and wanted to starve to death. When she was half hungry, she couldn't bear the hunger anymore. She found the leftovers and wolfed them down. When she finished eating, she actually learned the way Tang Gua used to catch fish and shrimp, but she didn't get much. Every day after eating, she would sit on the beach, gnashing her teeth and cursing Tang Gua. She would say all kinds of nasty things. When she was free, she would stare at the sea, hoping that a boat would come to pick her up. Later, she used the 1 million yuan to start a fire. Because it rained heavily for a while, she could only dig a hole to keep the fire. She didn't save the leaves in advance, so the 1 million yuan note came in handy. I want to chat with more like-minded people about. Chapter 2181. During Li Keshu's 20-odd years, most of her entanglements were with men. They only liked her for her youth and beauty, but they were not sincere to her. When she was in her 40s and old, the men who used to say sweet words to her left her side one after another and found younger and more beautiful women. Li Keshu was no longer useful to them. When they separated, they had blacklisted Li Keshu, so these men did not know that Li Keshu had disappeared. Even if they knew that she had disappeared, they did not care where she went. In their opinion, perhaps Li Keshu also knew that she was old and ugly, so she did not dare to face the old woman in the mirror and planned to choose a remote place to retire. After all, when they were together, Li Keshu also took some money from them, so she should have more or less saved some money for retirement. How could they know that Li Keshu had already lived a primitive life? The first few days were better, but later, she found that her body stank, so she had to find banana leaves to replace her clothes and wash them. However, the seawater had a fishy smell. Even if the clothes looked clean, they would still smell after being dried. She disliked it a few times, but she still wore it. However, how could that set of clothes be used? She had to wear the same set of clothes every day and change them from time to time to wash them. No matter how good the cloth was, it could not stand it. Not long after, the clothes were torn one after another. When she could no longer wear them, Li Keshu could only use various kinds of leaves to make clothes to cover her shame. Later, after the money was burned as firewood, the 4 safes became containers for her to store food. Webmobile/M. Later, she really lived the life of a primitive person, but she had more things than a primitive person: 4 safes and a fruit knife. In addition to starving to death, she also thought of drowning, but it was useless. She was very strong and survived. The animals in the forest on the island were not fierce, but they still came to snatch her food from time to time. Webcomputer/www. Li Keshu, who did not know anything, also learned to grimace. She used some sharpened tools to fight with the animals that snatched her food. Li Keshu, who didn't dare to kill small animals at first, was now able to kill them without batting an eyelid. Without any seasoning, the food was unpalatable and difficult to swallow. Later on, in order to fill her stomach, Li Keshu would swallow the food without batting an eyelid even if it was burnt. In order to drink a mouthful of water, she slowly began to distill the seawater. When she was free, she would still sit by the beach and curse Tangguo with all kinds of profanities she knew. Sometimes, she would stand by the beach and shout, hoping that someone would discover her. Just like that, Li Keshu's days passed day by day. From the initial hope to the final despair. Sometimes she would curse, sometimes she would cry, and sometimes she would laugh. She seemed to have gone mad, but at the same time, she didn't seem to have gone mad. Tangguo didn't know any of this. Late that night, Tangguo had just returned to her room from her work when she saw Shang Jin sitting by her bed. Shang Jin's gaze fell on her. Her eyes were filled with astonishment at her sudden appearance in the room. He quickly came to his senses and walked up to Tangguo to hug her. It was a feeling of regaining what he had lost. In the middle of the night, he realized that his side was cold. He searched the entire villa, but there was no trace of her. At that time, he really thought that she would never come back and that he was going to lose her. I want to chat with more like-minded people about. Chapter 2182. Where did you go? Shang Jin's voice was a little scared, a little nervous, and a little relieved that he had regained what he had lost. In short, this sentence revealed too many emotions. It was the most complicated sentence he had ever said since he was born. Tangguo hugged him and patted his back. Little brother, I'm sorry to scare you. I'll let you know when I'm going down to do something. Will you come back after you go? How can I not come back? You're here. If I really didn't come back, I wouldn't have come back today. Since they were already married, Tangwa didn't intend to hide what she was going to do. Even if Shang Jin knew, he wouldn't stop her. Perhaps he wouldn't even ask her what she was going to do. He would only care about whether she would come back or not. Sure enough, he was indeed like this. Occasionally, she would disappear for a while at night. As the person who slept next to her, he would know sooner or later. Tonight's incident could be considered half-intentional. If Shang Jin didn't find out, it would be fine. If he found out, she would tell him and wouldn't hide it from him in the future. Shang Jin hugged her for a long time and didn't want to let go. He looked like he was afraid that she would fly away. Internet computer, www.com, wake me up in the future. Sure enough, as she expected, Shang Jin was most concerned about her existence, not why she suddenly disappeared. He didn't even care about how she suddenly disappeared and appeared. Tang Guo looked up and saw Shang Jin's serious and persistent eyes. She tiptoed and kissed him on the lips. Okay, I'll definitely wake you up in the future. You can't sleep when I'm not around. Little brother, you can go to the kitchen and cook for me in the future. When I come back, I can even have some supper. Okay. Shang Jin agreed and sounded a little happy. Then he pushed Tang Guo into the bathroom and turned around to help her get clean clothes. Then he waited at the door of the bathroom and waited for her to knead the clothes before bringing them in. Since Shang Jin knew this secret, Tang Guo didn't hide it when she went out. During dinner, she would tell Shang Jin that she would go out for a while when it was time. Shang Jin had never asked her where she was going. When the time came, he would sit in the house and watch her disappear. Then, he would go to the kitchen to cook. At first, he was a little nervous, afraid that she would not come back. Later on, she came back every time, and Shang Jin gradually felt relieved. No matter what she went to do, as long as she came back. Sure enough, he had said before that she was not the most ordinary. She was clearly the most extraordinary one. This time, Tang Guo received the latest information from the system. Looking at the information, she had already calmed down. It was useless to be angry. At this time, she would only call the flower god the harvester of sin. The victims of this incident were the beautiful boys and girls of the orphanage. The organizers were the director and other members of the orphanage. They were mainly targeted at wealthy businessmen with special interests. If they fell into her hands, no matter what kind of wealthy businessmen they were, they would have to pay a heavy price. Not only would they have to suffer physical pain, but they would also have to be famous. Moreover, the location this time was very close. The other party's current gathering place was in a wealthy businessman's villa. Coincidentally, this villa was not far from the villa she lived in. Shang Jin stood in front of Tang Guo eagerly, his eyes glued to her body. She hugged him. When she was about to leave, Shang Jin pointed at his face. She smiled and tiptoed to kiss his cheek. I'll be back soon. I want to chat with more like-minded people about. Chapter 2183. Shang Jin watched as Tang Guo disappeared from the room. He turned on the computer beside him and clicked on a recording. After listening carefully, he realized that the recording was actually of him and Tang Guo chatting about their daily lives at home. He had made many such recordings during this period of time, so he basically wouldn't play them repeatedly. He didn't know what she was doing, but he had to be prepared for her to be at home. The bed curtains were closed. He took out a dummy from behind the wardrobe and placed it on the chair that Tang Guo usually liked to sit on. The dummy could still move, but it didn't move all the time. It would only move occasionally. Just by looking at its shadow, it was really no different from a human. www.com. It was about 8:00 and the lights were on. Looking at the bed curtains from the outside, one could see a woman sitting by the window. She seemed to be reading a book with her chin propped up. Accompanied by those recordings, it was like the daily life of a young couple. The recording played for a while. When it stopped, he went to the kitchen to cook. Tangwa never thought that Shang Jin would do such a thing behind her back. At this time, Tangwa had already arrived at a villa not far from her home. There were about 20 rich businessmen who were having a party and enjoying a banquet here today. She appeared in the villa wearing the invisibility cloak. She happened to see a few boys and girls who were dressed very well, but their faces were very pale. They were standing by the coffee table, trembling. These boys and girls had been here more than once or twice. Every time they participated in such an event, they were carried back to the orphanage like rag dolls. These people would hurt their bodies, but not their faces. After 10 days to half a month in the orphanage, their bodies slowly recovered, and they would be selected to be here again. They didn't want to come, but they had no choice. They didn't have parents or relatives. If they wanted to live, they could only be manipulated by these people and be used as tools. Of course, how many of them came didn't necessarily mean how many of them would go back in the end. Web computer, www.comas for those who would never wake up. They didn't know where these people would be sent. Even if they knew, there was nothing they could do. Because they were a group of people who couldn't even control their own fates. By the time they grew up, their bodies and minds were already severely damaged. If they wanted to live, they had to be obedient. Otherwise, the people here had plenty of ways to make them experience what it meant to be better off dead. Tangwa walked past these children. Most of them were between 5 and 10 years old. They were supposed to be lively and happy, but their delicate faces were only numb. Their eyes were dull, without the slightest bit of light. Currently, the party had not started yet. Not all the rich businessmen had arrived yet. Tangwa sat patiently in the stairwell, waiting for their arrival. At about 9 o'clock, everyone had arrived. The children were dressed up beautifully and placed in front of them like goods for them to choose from. Tangwa finally saw the different expressions on these children's faces. They were all filled with despair. When everyone had chosen a child, Tangwa made her move. She quickly came down from the stairwell with a knife in her hand. One of them felt a force pushing him and had no choice but to put down the child in his hand. When he was about to ask what had happened, he felt a sharp pain in a certain part of his body. It was so painful that he almost fainted. I want to chat with more like-minded people about. Chapter 2184. Everyone's attention was drawn to the sound of the screams. The child who had been thrown to the ground was also confused for a moment. Even though her body was in pain, she did not dare to cry out. When she saw the man who had been holding her rolling on the ground, a large amount of blood was oozing out of a certain part of his body, and her eyes shone with some vigor. From the despair of the past, there was a faint joy. Of course, she thought of something and quickly concealed her feelings. Her expression returned to the same as before, and nothing could be seen. However, if one looked carefully, her body was trembling a little, and the corners of her mouth were slightly curved. She sat on the ground and stared blankly at the man who was rolling on the ground in pain. In fact, she was laughing wildly in her heart. Although she did not know what had happened to this man, she thought that this was retribution. God could not bear to see this and had specially come to punish him. Otherwise, why would such a bizarre thing happen? A blood-curdling scream rang out, followed by another. Finally, it attracted the attention of others. At this time, there were already 3 people who were injured. They were in so much pain that they were rolling on the ground and screaming. When the others saw that the situation was not right, they threw the child in their hands to the side. Some ran out of the door, some ran upstairs, planning to find a place to hide. There were also some who took out their phones and prepared to make a call. When they were in this kind of activity, it was impossible for them to bring other people and bodyguards. After all, if this kind of thing was exposed, it would be a fatal blow to them. Now that the internet was so advanced, they were actually afraid, but it could not stop them from having this kind of hobby. Those who wanted to run out of the villa found that the door had long been locked. The people who made the call found that there was no signal on their phones. Hearing the screams in their ears, they covered a certain part of their body and quickly ran to where they could run. The people who went upstairs found that all the rooms were locked. The only place they could move around was the villa's living room. In a short period of time, 8 people were rolling on the ground in pain. No matter what they did, they could not stop this from happening. There were even people who had knelt on the ground and begged for mercy, saying that they did not dare to do it again. As long as they let him go, he was willing to do more good in his next life. What awaited him was only his own scream. It was so painful that the veins on his forehead were bulging. In just 10 minutes, everything was over. The group of children who had been thrown to the side stood numbly and excitedly in the corner. Seeing these usually high and mighty perverts jumping up and down like monkeys, and even crying and begging for mercy, they were not able to escape punishment. Their heavy and sad hearts were somewhat relieved. Netcomputer, www.com. To be honest, watching them suffer while they were still alive made them feel really good. Tang Guo also noticed these children. It was because she noticed their situation that she did this in front of them. In their hearts, they were no longer ordinary children. Seeing these people being punished, they actually felt a little happier. In the end, she called the police and emergency services. She did not keep the information about the crimes committed by these people in the villa alone. Instead, she let the system publish it on the internet. After all, the identities of these people were all wealthy businessmen, and they had a wide range of connections. If they did not expose all the evidence, they might be able to avoid a disaster. www.com. After doing all this, Tang Guo wrote a paragraph on a piece of paper and placed it in front of the group of children. Live on, your lives have just begun. The darkness of the past has ended, and you are about to welcome the light. I want to chat with more like-minded people about. Chapter 2185. On this day, the people who were surfing the internet suddenly saw a pop-up post. Because the title was too attractive, they had no choice but to click on it. When they clicked on it and saw the content, they were so angry that they almost dropped their phones on the ground. It was past 9:00 at night. In today's era of big data and internet, very few people slept at this time, especially young people. At this time, they were basically holding their phones and looking at it. Countless forums and various places exposed the actions of those rich businessmen. Every incident was recorded in detail, including the name list, the people involved, and the location. She not only was it true, but the companies under these people's hands were also exposed for tax evasion. Although it was a little flat, it realized that this matter was very serious and immediately controlled it. It deleted the post and even set up a keyword block. However, with their technology, how could they hide from the system? As long as the system wanted to, it could directly expose this information to the public and make the darkness unable to hide. Flat was in despair because they realized that no matter what, they could not stop the existence of these posts. After deleting one, there would be a second post immediately. Then, they realized that all the major platforms were like this. There were even some small windows. It was as if there was a pair of invisible hands controlling the entire internet. Everything was in the hands of the other party. That mysterious person had already controlled the internet. Meanwhile, the majority of the netizens were seriously flipping through the information. The more they read, the angrier they became. They also knew that these platforms were shitty. They casually clicked to save and take screenshots. Even if it was deleted, they could still take out a backup. The information of the director and members of the orphanage, as well as the participants, was all exposed. Not long after, the police who received the call rushed to the scene of the incident. When they opened the door, they heard screams. The paramedics also rushed over and hurriedly stopped the bleeding of the injured people at the scene. At the same time, they also noticed the group of children standing in the corner. They were expressionless and could be said to be numb. One of the children seemed to be eating something. When they took a closer look, there were some scraps of paper left at the corner of his mouth. This made them guess that he was probably eating paper. Regarding this behavior, they could only judge that this child's behavior was because he had been tortured for a long time and was a little mentally unstable. Otherwise, these people had already encountered such a tragic situation. How could they still quietly stand in the corner, not doing anything, not running, and not making a fuss? If he was a normal child, he would have been scared to tears. They didn't know that the child who had eaten the paper earlier had only sensed that someone was coming. They have seen the darkest things in the world and subconsciously ate the piece of paper with the words written on it that Tang Guo gave them before. No matter who the culprit was, or who the writer was, they would protect her well and not let her be discovered. If it wasn't for her arrival, these bad guys wouldn't have been punished. Actually, they did not feel that bad, even though they were being sized up by others. Although these gazes were somewhat different, what could be more embarrassing than the gazes that looked at them as if they were goods and animals? www.com. These children were also taken away. On the same day, the orphanage was sealed and all the children were taken away. They were currently receiving counseling. And this matter was a matter that shocked the entire country and was highly regarded. After doing all this, Tang Guo had already returned to the villa. After eating the supper that Shang Jin made for her, she went to the bathroom to take a shower. Shang Jin sat on the sofa, listening to the sound of water coming from the bathroom while browsing the latest news on the internet. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the time of the incident. When Tang Guo came out, he automatically took a clean towel and helped her dry her hair. The two of them got along very warmly. I want to chat with more like-minded people about transmigration, female supporting character, calm down. Talking about life, looking for a confidant peak. Chapter 2186. At dawn, the entire internet was in an uproar because of the orphanage incident this time. Countless netizens who hated evil as if it was their enemy could not stop the abuse that filled the sky. No one knew who revealed the hospital where the participants were currently at. Not only did the reporters from Beehive Bees rush to that place, but some members of their own organizations also went to that hospital to surround the people. Not only that, but the companies under these people were all surrounded. There were also reporters squatting outside their homes. Some angry people even threw tomatoes and eggs at their windows. As soon as their family members appeared, they would be surrounded by a swarm of reporters. Especially when the wives of these people were facing the reporters, they were speechless and embarrassed. They only knew that their husbands did have many women outside, and they did not know how many young and beautiful women they kept. However, they really did not expect that they would have such a hobby to do such a thing to such young children. Perhaps they were indifferent to their husbands' mistresses and did not care that much. However, any woman who had been a mother would find it difficult to accept that they had hurt those children. When they saw those videos yesterday, many women had already fallen into confusion. Later, it was the bodyguards who took them away from the reporters. Faced with one sharp question after another, they were at a loss and did not know how to answer. The reporters asked them if they knew what their husbands had done. If they did not know, how could they not know? They were husband and wife. Even if they really did not know, weren't they husband and wife? If they did not know that their husbands were doing such things outside, was it because the two of them were not on good terms? If they knew, then the problem was serious. Of course, whether they knew or not, they could only say that they did not know. As for the rest, they could no longer control it. This time, the evidence was conclusive. It should be said that the netizens on the entire internet were quick to keep countless pieces of evidence. After a night of fermenting, this content could be seen everywhere on all platforms. It could no longer be blocked unless all these platforms were shut down. No, it should be that the internet was shut down. However, now that everyone knew about this matter, could shutting down the internet be able to stop the gossip? www.com. This time, the matter was not as groundless as before, and there was not enough evidence. Because there was too much evidence, these people had nowhere to run. In particular, a few of the rich businessmen had done a lot of charity on the surface. Some of the charities were about orphanages and programs to care for children in backward mountainous areas. Now that she looked at those pictures and videos again, that gentle face instantly reminded her of a phrase, beast in human face. www.com. There was sufficient evidence. Almost all the places that needed to be investigated had been found by Tangwa. She only needed to seal up the relevant places according to what was written and arrest the person. Everything went smoothly, and the principal of the school was involved as well. The school was where the children of the orphanage went to school. It turned out that they had nowhere to run. That school was another cage. In the past, the children who wanted to escape and expose everything were killed because they didn't realize that the school was also a wolf's den. In a very short time, all of this was settled. Those who should be punished were punished. Although the matter was huge, with sufficient evidence, none of these people ended up well. In the end, the whereabouts of the children in the orphanage became a problem that most netizens were worried about in the future. I want to chat with more like-minded people about crossover, female supporting character, calm down. Talking about life, looking for a confidant vertex. Chapter 2187. Everyone was worried that this group of children, who had suffered countless physical and mental traumas, would be criticized if they were sent to ordinary schools separately. Children's words carried no harm. Children's words were also the most hurtful. The children who had suffered such things were definitely very fragile mentally. If the ordinary children in the school were insensible and said something carelessly, or even formed some small groups and were unwilling to play with them, it would be a second blow to them. Also, because the matter was too serious, the children's information was absolutely confidential. Previously, there was a reporter who had taken some photos and even planned to interview the children about what they had experienced at the time. www.com. Then, this reporter was directly arrested. Not only was he arrested, but he also had to face prosecution. When many reporters heard this news, at first, they thought that it was just a scare and not true. Later, two more fearless people sneaked in and were arrested again. Moreover, this time, someone revealed that it seemed that there was going to be a new law. Because of the special situation, the higher-ups planned to quickly pass this law and immediately implement it when it was passed. Everything happened too quickly, and they did not have time to react. In the end, those 3 reporters were prosecuted and sentenced. The matter was unprecedentedly serious. Of course, there was still no way to solve the problem of these children's whereabouts. They could not stop them from not going to school and not interacting with people, right? They really could not guarantee that they would not be bullied if they were placed in one place. Even if they were placed in ordinary schools separately, with these children's personalities, they would be very unsociable. There was a huge difference between them and ordinary children. Basically, they would stand in a corner and use a pair of calm eyes to look around. They would not cry, make a fuss, or play. Otherwise, they would squat at the side and keep staring at a certain place. Some of the people who liked to read kept staring at the books. Those who liked to play with their phones kept staring at their phones. There were also those who liked to be in a daze. They would be in a daze for the entire morning. No matter what was said to them, they would listen attentively. When it was over, they would completely ignore it. The older children might even exchange a few words with others. As for the younger ones, when they saw some fat or strong men, they would subconsciously stand on the spot obediently and not move. The sadness in their eyes was really heartbreaking. Of course, there were some exceptions. For example, the 20-over children who had experienced that mysterious incident that day, their eyes were a little different from the other children. What was the difference? It was their eyes that were different. When there was no one around, they would gather together and whisper something. It was obvious that they had formed a small group. In short, they were much more lively. Just as everyone was frowning, a piece of good news came. The famous pianist Shang Jin was willing to accept this group of children. Shang Jin was the only successor of the Shang family. If he wanted to accept this group of children and give them a quiet learning environment, he could definitely do it. Guagua and I don't want children. Shang Jin gave a reason to the people who questioned him. While everyone was surprised, he added, I have a lot of houses. Tangua, who was standing next to Shang Jin and being held by him, almost laughed out loud when she heard this. Yes, yes, yes. Her little brother really had a lot of houses. Xin Shang Jin's parents also accompanied them. When they heard this, they couldn't help but laugh. They absolutely agreed with this matter. I want to chat with more like-minded people about crossover, female supporting character, calm down. Talking about life, looking for a confidant vertex. Chapter 2188. We definitely can't release the recording to the public. But we can accept providing it to the relevant departments. Tangua said. Giving them a stable and quiet environment is a good idea. If the other party released the recording to show them, wouldn't it expose their privacy? How would they be happy if everyone watched them grow up like monkeys? Unless one of them is willing to do so in the future, no one has the right to release their lives and studies to the public. Madam Tang is right. We didn't think it through. Computer, www. Shang Jin glanced at the person who spoke and corrected him. It's Mrs. Shang. Tangua pursed her lips and smiled. The person who spoke first was stunned for a moment before he reacted quickly. Yes, it's my mistake. I should have addressed her as Mrs. Shang. Then, he subconsciously looked at Shang Jin's mother. What should he address her as? He quickly reacted and said to Shang Jin's mother, then Mrs. Shang, after taking in this group of children, we will send some people over to take care of them. Do you have any objections? Shang Jin's mother was all smiles just now. Hearing this address, she obviously accepted it. www.com. That's right. Her Jin already had a wife. His wife was the new Mrs. Shang and she should be Mrs. Shang. It was a good address. Since meeting Tangua, her son not only lived a normal life, but also became the pride of their family and achieved the achievement of being a pianist. Now that the two of them didn't want children, Shang Jin's mother didn't ask for much. As long as her son was happy, it was fine. Those children were really pitiful to have suffered so much at such a young age. In the end, this matter was settled. There were a few villas that belonged to Shang Jin and Tangua around the villa that Shang Jin and Shang Jin lived in. But after they got married, Shang Jin transferred these villas to Tangua's name. Now, these villas were just nice for the children to live in. There were about 100 children in the orphanage. These villas were just right for them to live in. It wasn't crowded or lonely. Later on, Papa Shang even bought a piece of land nearby and built a school for the children to go to school. Two of the teachers were Tanggua and Shangjin. Tanggua taught them cultural classes. She taught all the subjects by herself. When Tang Ran heard this, she was stunned. Her lazy sister actually became an all-round teacher. Shangjin was not idle either. Other than performing, he was in charge of the children's art classes. Although he was a pianist, he didn't only know how to play the piano. He knew how to play all kinds of instruments, and there was always one that children liked. As for art, he also knew how to do it. But when he taught art classes, he liked to draw portraits the most. There was only one person in his portrait, and that was Tanggua. Therefore, he was considered an irresponsible teacher in the art class. However, they were not the only teachers in the school. There were other teachers as well. When they were tired and had things to do, these teachers would help to substitute for them. Some of the things that they couldn't teach were taught by these professional teachers. The teachers who were invited here all had good qualities and were willing to sincerely help these children. Among this group of children, the 20 or so who were at the scene of the incident were the most active and improved the fastest. Their eyes were filled with hope. I want to chat with more like-minded people about transmigration, female supporting character, calm down. Talk about life, find a confidant peak. Chapter 2189. No matter what Tanggua taught them, they focused on learning. Their eyes were filled with a strong thirst for knowledge. www.com. It was also because these 20-odd children had the best relationship. They all lived in the same villa. However, they were not unfamiliar with the other children. Instead, when Tanggua was not paying attention, they would counsel the other children. Once, she even saw a 6-year-old girl who had just started learning to read. She was trying to enlighten an 8-year-old boy. She even wrote a paragraph on the ground with chalk and asked the boy, "Do you know how to read these words?" The 8-year-old boy stared at the row of words on the ground and stuttered a little. However, he still did not recognize a few words, causing his face to turn red. "How old are you this year?" 8 years old. You're already 8 years old. I'm 6. The boy did not know what the little girl wanted to say. He just stared at the row of words and suddenly said, "Then can you read it?" "You're really strange. I wrote these words. Why can't I read them?" After he finished speaking, he read the line of words clearly. Tanggua was standing not far away. She heard the little girl say with her own ears, "Live on. Your lives have just begun. The darkness of the past is over. You're about to welcome the light." She raised her eyebrows. She was surprised that this 6-year-old girl could also read this sentence clearly. She did not know if she could understand the meaning of this paragraph. She had left those words because among the 20 children, there were a few who were just over 10 years old. Looking at their gray eyes, she suddenly remembered some past events. Once upon a time, when she was ignorant and could not see the end of the world, she was also confused like this. The world did not end, and she had to experience all kinds of darkness every day. It was indeed despairing. In the past, she had neglected that she could not find a bright way out only when she reached the end. Since the world was dark, why couldn't she light a bright lamp and illuminate her own world? If her world was bright, then it was bright. Why should she be afraid of the surrounding darkness? She did not listen to what the 2 children had to say. Anyway, that girl had a bright future. The children here were actually very smart. They just lacked an opportunity. Their world was very dark, and she could only provide them with a box of matches. The wick was in their hands, and it was up to them whether they wanted to light up their own world or not. Later on, she could see similar scenes in many corners. It was as if the 20-odd suns had agreed to slowly awaken the children with numb eyes. Later, Tang Guo was woken up by the sound of the morning reading next door. She pulled open the curtains and walked to the balcony. She could see the children sitting in a circle on the green lawn reading aloud. They looked more and more lively, and it was enough to captivate people. She did not even notice Shang Jin walking behind her. Calm. Calm until she felt someone hugging her from behind. Beautiful. Shang Jin only said one word. Tang Guo asked, "What's beautiful?" The scenery. Shang Jin paused and looked at her beautiful face. And the people. He kissed her forehead. "Good morning, Teacher Tang." "Good morning, Teacher Shang." It was the voices of the group of children. Obviously, they had good eyesight and noticed their presence. "I want to chat with more like-minded people about transmigration, female supporting character, calm down. Talking about life, looking for confidence peak." Chapter 2190. Good morning, children. Tang Guo greeted the children with a smile on her face. Shang Jin let go of her waist and held her hand instead. He looked at the rising sun and suddenly said, "The weather is good. Shall we go out to sketch? Bring them along." "Yeah," Shang Jin replied and went back to the bedroom to get his phone. Get someone to arrange it. With so many children to bring out, he definitely had to arrange for people to take care of them and assign some bodyguards to ensure their safety. "Your teacher Shang said that the weather is good today and you guys are sweet. Today, I'll bring you out to sketch. Are you happy?" "Yes." Upon hearing that they were going out, the children all jumped out with their books. Actually, when Shang Jin brought the children out in the beginning, they were very resistant. In this school, they had a really good life and wanted to live like this for the rest of their lives. Especially as they grew older and learned more, they also went online and read the comments on the internet. They knew that the people outside might not be able to look at them with normal and kind eyes, and they were also afraid of being talked about. Therefore, they were very resistant to going out. Fortunately, they were on camera and assured that there would be no problems. In the end, only 30 children were willing to go out for the first time. Among them, 20 were the most lively group. Shang Jin's protection work was too good. Moreover, 1 or 2 years had passed, and the outside world had gradually forgotten about this matter. People only mentioned it occasionally, but most of them were scolding the bad guys for what happened. After going out, they realized that it was not as bad as they thought. They even got to know more people. Moreover, Shang Jin would get people to arrange some activities, which brought them endless fun and made them feel a different world. It made them forget to go back. This was what Shang Jin decided from the beginning. At first, he wanted to give them a stable environment, but they would eventually integrate into society in the future. They could not be sealed in here forever. Therefore, after they settled down, he would slowly bring them out to experience the beauty of this world. Perhaps he was sick and had stayed in an autism school for a few years, so he could empathize with them and came up with this idea. Shang Jin did everything, so Tang Guo could only stay by his side and praise him every day. "Little brother, you're really amazing. You actually thought of such a good idea. Little brother, you're the most attentive person I've ever met. Calm. Shang Jin was already used to receiving Tang Guo's compliments. He would feel uncomfortable if he didn't listen to her for a day. Just like today, after Shang Jin asked someone to make the arrangements, Tang Guo ran into the room, held his face, and kissed him fiercely. Then, she praised him, "Little brother, you're really a good person." The host is shamelessly taking advantage of me again. Seriously, this guy looks like he's at your mercy. Do you have to be so obvious? Although Shang Jin did not laugh happily, the curve of his mouth showed that he was very happy. He held her arm. Gua Gua is the best. The two of them were lovey-dovey for a while before they went to change their clothes. After changing, they ate breakfast and made arrangements for their subordinates. When they arrived at the small school across the street, the children had already carried their school bags. Every one of them was neatly dressed and lined up at the entrance. Their orderly appearance made the adults present look at them with complicated expressions. However, when they saw the anticipation in their eyes, they laughed again. The day of sketching outside was a happy one. The children painted while Shang Jin played the piano. At the same time, Tang Guo would occasionally sing some cheerful songs. Her singing was really good. This was what everyone was thinking. Shang Jin thought that when he went back, he would definitely ask Guo Guo to sing again. He wanted to chat with more like-minded people about. Chapter 2191. The group of children in the orphanage were growing up well. The relevant department personnel who had been monitoring this matter did not believe the information they received. Looking at the smiles on these children's faces that were no different from other children's, they felt touched and tears welled up in their eyes. They also had people taking care of these children in this school. It could be said that the Shang family was responsible for the expenses of these children's growth. Although Shang Jin did not manage the company yet, with his reputation as a pianist, the expenses he received from various performances were a huge sum. At the same time, some people noticed that the ordinary Tang Guo seemed to be a very capable investor. Basically, the companies that she invested in had never lost money. Web mobile phone terminal /m. .com/later on, she was interviewed. In the past, she seemed to have enjoyed a simple life and did not care about money. What was the reason that made her personally invest in a company? Because I have a big family to support. Little brother and I are husband and wife. I can't let this burden fall on him alone. Everyone was enlightened. So, life forced this rich madam to earn money personally. But the speed at which she earned money was too fast. Her foresight was also very good. Later on, there were people who followed her tail and invested. Indeed, they earned a lot. There were even some companies that came to her for consultation at a high price. To Tang Guo, these were just things that she could talk about. The system watched from the side and sighed. This was the huge capital that the host had. After transmigrating through thousands of worlds and seeing thousands of things, the experience that she had learned was not something that ordinary people could compare with. Just a little bit of it would be able to benefit people greatly. Even a stupid person who had transmigrated through thousands of people with different identities would be able to gain something as long as they did not go through life in a daze. Webmobile/www.com. Of course, every night, other than Shang Jin, no one knew that Mrs. Shang would do something earth-shattering. This secret was only known to him. He was also glad that she was only willing to tell him. Even though they never talked about this, they should understand each other. There were some things that didn't need to be said. They already understood in their hearts. Time passed quickly, and another few years passed. This year, Tang Ran was 30 years old and had made a huge breakthrough in her field. She was also secretly protected. All information about her on the internet was blocked. Even her residence was assigned to the most confidential and secure place. There were troops patrolling 24 hours a day. At the same time, Tang Guo also received the news that there would be bodyguards arranged to stay around her to ensure her safety. It was said that this was Tang Ran's own request. The first thing she thought of was that the things she had now would bring great changes to the country, and the most important family member to her was her sister. Therefore, she proposed that she must protect her sister. Only then could she continue to live in peace and be willing to dedicate her life to these things. To them, this was simply a small request. As for Tang Ran's parents, not to mention Li Keshu's whereabouts, they didn't even ask about Tang Yuankuan's indifferent attitude towards the two sisters. If Tang Ran didn't mention it, it definitely wasn't important. I want to chat with more like-minded people about transmigration, female supporting character, calm down. Chat about life, find confidence peak. Chapter 2192. Because of this, Tang Guo understood the importance of this matter. If it was an ordinary thing, it wouldn't be so important. It might even be a threat to her safety. As for what powerful thing Tang Ran had created, she didn't ask. She just asked someone to send a necklace to Tang Ran. This was a necklace that could protect Tang Ran and ensure that she wouldn't be in any danger. In Tang Ran's later experience, there were countless crises. No matter how good the protection was, it couldn't prevent people from sneaking in and attacking her. Some things couldn't be prevented at all. If it wasn't for the necklace Tang Guo gave her, Tang Ran would have died countless times. Even if she didn't die, she might have been seriously injured. Of course, this was a story for later. When Tang Ran was 31 years old, she finally had some free time. It was the new year. Because Tang Ran's situation was very special and Tang Guo wanted to meet her, they went to the place where Tang Ran was assigned. The people who went were Tang Guo, Shang Jin, and Wen Mo. That night, after a sumptuous dinner, they sat on the balcony and watched the fireworks. Xin Shi Wen Mo suddenly took out a bouquet of roses and proposed to Tang Ran. The two grew up together. It was impossible to say that Tang Ran didn't like Wen Mo. She also liked Wen Mo's attentiveness and care for her. But her current status was special and she didn't have much time to accompany him. After Tang Ran told him about her concerns, Wen Mo just smiled and said, "Then I'll come back every day to cook for you. I'll stay here in the future." Tang Guo subconsciously glanced at Shang Jin. With Wen Mo's thick skin, he wouldn't be able to do that. She poked Shang Jin's waist and whispered, "Little brother, did you teach him to say that?" "Yeah. No wonder he can say such shameless things." Shang Jin, so in Guoguo's heart, he's a shameless person. System, isn't that so? Shang Jin, seems like it. Does chasing a wife need shame? If you want shame, you won't be able to get a wife. Wen Mo had already done this. As the founder of a new company, he didn't need to do this at all. How could Tang Ran reject him when he could wait for so long? Calm. That night, she accepted Wen Mo's proposal. As for the wedding, Tang Guo was in charge of it. As for Tang Yuankuan, she had no intention of informing him. In the past, Tang Yuankuan did not care about the two sisters at all. Ever since she came, he rarely used the family Tang's money. Wasn't she the one who paid for Tang Ran's education in high school, college, and all kinds of learning materials? Tang Yuankuan thought that his two daughters could be self-sufficient and that he didn't need to worry about them. In the future, he could enjoy the fruits of others' labor. However, he didn't know that there was a saying in this world, if you want to reap without paying, then you're dreaming. The wedding was still very strict, and it was not held in a lively place. However, there were many people who came, and all of them were big shots. Shang Jin's parents naturally came as well. This time, they finally understood how powerful their daughter-in-law's younger sister was. In particular, the investment talent that Tang Guo had shown over the years made them realize that the two sisters were not simple. After the wedding, the days returned to normal. When Mo finally got married to the person he liked, and they had a wonderful wedding night. It was not the bloody wedding night of the past. Tang Ran also felt Wen Mo's nervousness that day, as well as the way he stared at her without blinking when she woke up in the morning. I want to chat with more like-minded people about. Chapter 2193. when Nemo kissed her on the lips and said something strange. Ran, this doesn't seem like a dream. Although Tang Ran felt that something was wrong, she interpreted it as making Wen Mo wait for too long. As for Wen Heng, he was naturally very happy to have such a capable daughter-in-law. Anyone would be happy. Although he wasn't fighting on the front lines now, he was still serving the people. When he reached the age of retirement and couldn't move much, he would settle down. All these years, the thing he was most concerned about was the mysterious organization that appeared from time to time. He was actually afraid that this organization would appear. Because every time they appeared, it meant that some dark place was about to be exposed. If that organization disappeared one day, would it mean that there was no such place in this world? In the end, Wen Heng shook his head. No. If that organization disappeared, it might be because they were tired. Because of the existence of humans and the existence of the world, where there was light, there would be darkness. That organization was like a bright star. If it disappeared, he would feel regretful. After so many years, no one had found out about their existence. This could only mean that they were very skilled. He even hoped that they could exist a little longer. Webphone/M. Com/is for capturing them, many people didn't want to do so. Ever since the incident at the orphanage became a big deal, that organization gained many fans. The fans gave the organization a special name, Devil's Angels. Evil demons, children's angels. Wen Heng felt that this name was indeed very appropriate. To those evil people, wasn't that organization a devil? To those children, it was really an angel. Tang Yuankuan still found out about Tang Ran's marriage. He couldn't find Tang Ran to make trouble. In fact, he didn't dare to. He also knew that he couldn't afford to offend Tang Ran now. Thus, he could only look for Tang Gua. You didn't inform your family about your marriage, and Ran didn't inform me, her father either. So, do you care about me at all? Tang Yuankuan was already in his 50s, almost 60. He was old, and because he had to worry about his youngest son, Tang Bin, half of his hair had turned white. The wrinkles on his face were also like ravines. Her eyes were also cloudy. The way she looked at Tang Guo was filled with anger and helplessness at her daughter's unfilial behavior. Then, since we were young, have you treated me, Ran, as your daughter? Why don't I treat you as my daughters? If I hadn't raised you all, would you be where you are today? www.com. When parents give birth to children, they have the obligation to raise them until they reach adulthood. But if you think about it carefully, did you not give us much money when we were in the 2nd grade? Tang Gua smiled and said, because Ran's grades were too outstanding, the school directly waived all her fees and even gave her a bonus every year. Part of the bonus was used to pay for my study materials and books, and the rest was used to buy materials for Ran. Every semester, Ran will participate in some competitions and basically win the first prize. The prize money for these competitions usually ranges from 1,000 to 5,000 yuan. So many. Tang Yuankuan's face turned pale. He knew that his youngest daughter was outstanding. Indeed, at that time, the school said that Tang Ran was very outstanding and waived all her fees. Even her meals were free. I want to chat with more like-minded people about. Chapter 2194. There were even some subsidies. At that time, his house was demolished, and he had a lot of money, so he did not care about those things. The two children proposed to use the prize money to pay for Tang Gua's books and meals. He did not have any objections. He did not need to worry about his daughter, and the money he saved could be used to buy 2 toys for his son. He also knew about Tang Ran's participation in the competition, but he did not know much about it. He thought it was not a lot, and it was only a few hundred yuan. Because of Su Siyun and Tang Bin, he gave up the idea of attending the parent-teacher conference. Su Siyun told him that he did not need to worry about his daughter, and he did not need to attend the parent-teacher conference. Now, Tang Yuankun was very annoyed when he heard that the competition cost at least a few thousand yuan. It was such a big sum of money. It would be great if he could give it to Xiao Bing. Tang Guo knew what Tang Yuankun was thinking, but she did not care. As a father, you did not give Ran and me any money when we were in the 2nd grade. You did not care about us. You used to give us 2 bowls of instant noodles after we came back from school, but now you can't bear to do so. Are you qualified? Tang Yuankun was speechless. After a while, he said, no matter what, I am still your and Ran's father. As my daughters, you have the obligation to take care of me when I am old. Then you can sue Ran and me. Tang Guo said calmly. We will give you whatever the court decides. Tang Yuankun was speechless. It was troublesome to sue, and he could only get a few hundred yuan a month. It's okay if you don't sue. Ran and I will give you 500 yuan a month. After all, shouldn't your precious son, Tang Bin, be the one to take care of you when you are old? What? Am I wrong? You don't want Tang Bin to take care of you when you are old. Tang Guo saw Tang Yuankun's angry face. He is your son. Isn't your life's hope on him? Computer, www.com, is there anything else? If there is, just say it. If there is nothing else, please go back. Phone, www.com. Tang Yuankun's brain spun quickly. He had already thought of many ways to bite off a piece of bloody meat. Tang Guo saw through his thoughts. Don't forget Ran's current status. If you do anything that damages the reputation of a great scientist who has made contributions, the higher-ups will investigate thoroughly. When the time comes, it will be announced. You know in your heart who will be at a disadvantage. As for me, I can be considered half a merchant now. You should know that all merchants are unscrupulous. Merchants are least afraid of losing face, especially unscrupulous merchants. They can be shameless. I'm not threatening you. I'm just telling you that I have many ways to make you suffer. Go ahead and preach whatever you want, and see if the public will dig up the past. I'm guessing that I won't be the one suffering then. Tang Yuankun's face turned pale. He instantly understood. The strange thing was that Tang Guo was married to a super-rich man. His youngest daughter was too smart. She was already an accomplished scientist. She was young and still alive. As long as they were not soft-hearted, he could not do anything to them. Moreover, the one who would be embarrassed would be him. Tang Yuankun moved his lips. In the end, he turned and left. Not long after, Su Siyun brought Tang Bin to look for Tang Guo. They met at a cafe. Su Siyun explained to Tang Guo how much her family missed her and cared about her. She also told her how much her father, Tang Yuankun, cared about her. She wanted to chat with more like-minded people about transmigration, female supporting character, calm down. She wanted to talk about life and find a confidant peak. Chapter 2195. Tang Bin also called her big sister sweetly, as if the two of them were real siblings. If it weren't for the fact that Tang Guo clearly remembered that after Su Siyun and Tang Yuankun got married, she had never cared about the two sisters even once, she would have really thought that the other party was sincere. It was no wonder that Tang Yuankun was coaxed by Su Siyun. Back then, Su Siyun didn't care about them because she thought that no matter how smart her two daughters were, they would still have to marry in the future. Moreover, she thought that Tang Yuankun could control the two sisters with filial piety, so she didn't have the time to care about other people's children. Tang Guo stirred her coffee slowly without making a sound and quietly listened to them finish. When the two of them were thirsty and realized that Tang Guo still didn't respond, they stopped. Xiao Guo, are you still angry with your father? The misunderstanding between you and your father is too deep. If you don't go home, how will you know how much your father cares about you? Actually, I've been reflecting on myself all these years. It's mainly because I'm a stepmother. If I care about you, I'm afraid that you'll dislike me and people will gossip about me. Moreover, you're so obedient, so I didn't interfere anymore. If something really happened to you, how could I just stand by and watch? Does my father really care about Ran Ran and me? Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios, of course. Su Xiyun was overjoyed and quickly nodded. She had finally convinced Tang Guo. Just as she was about to say something, Tang Guo spoke again. I remember that our family also has several houses. Ran Ran and I are also Dad's daughters. Since Dad cares about us so much, I wonder if Ran Ran and I can have a share of those houses. Tang Guo said with a faint smile, if you're really so sincere, why don't you bring the real estate certificate and transfer 2 houses to Ran Ran and me? As for the rest, we can slowly talk about it. Hearing this, Su Xiyun and Tang Bin were dumbfounded. Houses. They did have several houses in the past, but in order to buy the best real estate in the city center, Tang Yuankuan sold the spare houses and only kept the one he lived in. He pooled his money and bought the best real estate, but those houses were long gone. Speaking of which, when the houses were demolished, they were allocated according to the number of people. The 2 extra houses originally belonged to Ran Ran and me. It's not too much to give them to us now, right? Tang Guo saw both of them keeping quiet and laughed. You can't tell me that Dad had left all his assets to Xiao Bing, right? Tang Guo's cold gaze fell on Tang Bin, making him feel uncomfortable all over. Of course, his father's property would be left to his only son. How could he leave it to those 2 losers? Xiao Guo, you and Ran Ran don't lack a house now. Do you have to, www. Calm, we don't lack anything, but do we have to give up and throw away what belongs to us? Besides, who knows what will happen in the future? Isn't it good to have one more house? Su sighs you, sister, Xiyun's family, Sister Tang, Xiao Guo, you are too distant. It's not good for a father and daughter to always talk about houses. It will affect their relationship. Blood brothers should settle accounts clearly. Furthermore, it's not like I don't want to acknowledge Dad. Why are you in such a hurry to ask me to go back? I thought you are in such a hurry to ask me to go back and distribute the houses. Su Xiyun was furious and did not know what to say. In the end, she left with Tang Bin and did not mention anything about asking Tang Guo to go back. Tang Guo looked at their backs and slowly took a sip of coffee. Don't worry. When Dad retires in the future, Ran Ran and I will give him 500 renminbi a month as pension. Su Xiyun was furious when she heard this. I want to chat with more like-minded people about transmigration, female supporting character, calm down. Talk about life and find a confidant peak. Chapter 2196. Tang Guo was a woman of her word. When Tang Yuankuan retired, she would transfer the 500 yuan she and Tang Ran gave to him every month. The note was still father's pension. Later, she found it troublesome and opened an account. She went to the bank and transferred 500 yuan to Tang Yuankuan every month. Together with Tang Ran's 500 yuan, it was 1,000 yuan to Tang Yuankuan. What could 1,000 yuan do in this era? Tang Guo basically didn't show her face. With Tang Ran's status, even if Tang Guo wanted to see her, she had to make an appointment in advance. Every time she went, she had to undergo all kinds of checks. Therefore, although an unqualified father like Tang Yuankun wouldn't be put in a difficult spot, it was still very difficult for him to see Tang Ran. Every time Tang Yuankun received a reminder of the transfer, his face looked like he had eaten shit. He really didn't care about 1,000 yuan. To him, it was too little. It should be said that to the two sisters, Tang Gua and Tang Ran, this 1,000 yuan was nothing. He couldn't accept it. But he couldn't do anything about it. He couldn't express his bitterness. Later, he and Su Siyun thought of all kinds of ways to make Tang Gua spit out the money, but they didn't succeed. Because they had to take care of Tang Bin and were old, they didn't have the energy to ask for money every day. Tang Bin's various things were taken care of by the two of them. After they got married and retired, they still had to help the two young people take care of the children, clean the house, cook, and so on. Tang Bin and his wife didn't care about anything. Whenever they had some money, they would go out to play and leave the children to the old couple. Even their grandson's expenses were all paid by the two of them. Later on, when he wanted to go to a good school, they felt the pressure and let Tang Bin bear it. Now, there was a conflict. Anyway, Tang Yuankun had always been living in misery. In the first half of his life, he was indifferent to Tang Gua and Tang Ran. In the second half of his life, he was indifferent to his son. Even if he was sick, he could only blame himself for falling sick again. A day in the hospital cost more than 1,000 yuan. Tang Yuankun was so angry that he stayed for an extra week. He originally wanted to return to his own house to live a carefree life, but he couldn't resist Su Siyun and his grandson's coaxing, so he had no choice but to take the initiative to return to that painful place to live. In this life, Tang Yuankun did not have an easy time, especially when his grandson grew up. The people who were closer to him were his parents, not his grandfather. Before he died, Tang Yuankun finally regretted it. He regretted that he didn't hold on to his two daughters who had a bright future. Tang Guo only lived to her early 40s in this world. When she was lying on the hospital bed, Shang Jin held her fair and slender hand tightly and kissed it devoutly. He said softly, "My star will stop shining soon." Tang Guo saw that Shang Jin's eyes had completely lost interest in this world. She also understood that he might not live long after she died. It might light up somewhere else. The earth is round. It's not that the stars aren't bright, it's just that you're standing in the wrong place. Shang Jin's eyes lit up for a moment. He leaned over and kissed her face. He whispered in her ear, "Guogua, are you saying that you'll be mine in the next life?" "That's not necessarily true." "What if you're not my type in the next life and are very bad?" "I don't want you. I'll be bad to the whole world, but I won't be bad to you." "Guogua, do you believe me?" Tang Guo looked at Shang Jin's expectant gaze. "I do." Because this person was too cruel to her. "Xin Shit, without you, I feel sorry on behalf of this world." Shang Jin held Tang Guo's hand. He personally experienced his lover's body gradually cooling down, and his heart was extremely sad. A month later, Shang Jin performed a mournful piano piece for the first time. The audience couldn't hold back their tears, and by the time they finished listening, their clothes were already wet. After the song ended, Shang Jin looked seriously at the edge of the stage. She took a rose from there and handed it to him. She whispered to him, "Little brother, you played so well." 3 months later, Shang Jin took care of everything and left this world without a sound. I want to chat with more like-minded people about. Chapter 2197. Tang Ran had been sad for a month because of Tang Guo's departure. She hadn't done anything for a month. After Tang Guo and Shang Jin left one after another, the children in the orphanage who had already integrated into society took care of their funerals. They found some strange things in Shang Jin's room. At the same time, Wen Imo and Tang Ran were also dealing with these things. After seeing these strange things, Wen Imo found a lot of things based on his intuition from his previous life and finally understood something. In the end, his eyes were filled with shock. He had always suspected that the mysterious organization was arranged by Shang Jin. Now, he realized that the person who did all this was Tang Guo. He didn't know how she did it. He only knew that she was really, as the outside world described her to be, a devil angel. What's wrong? Tang Ran felt that something was wrong with Wen Imo and asked with concern. Wen Imo and Shang Jin had a good relationship. Wen Imo didn't know if Shang Jin had noticed it, but Wen Imo thought that she had. Because when they were together, Shang Jin would always create the feeling that the boss of the organization was Shang Jin. www.com. Now that he thought about it, Shang Jin had deliberately exposed some flaws in order to protect the person she treasured the most. If Shang Jin hadn't taught him the method, he wouldn't have had the courage to propose to Ran Ran. Therefore, he was grateful to Shang Jin. It's nothing. I just found it hard to accept that sister and brother-in-law couldn't be separated. Tang Ran's eyes welled up and tears fell uncontrollably. Yes, they couldn't be separated. From the first time sister saw that little brother opposite her, tricked him into her class, and even demoted him to the same class as her, I knew that they couldn't be separated for the rest of their lives. These few months of life and death separation are the last time they will be separated after being together. I suddenly want to know the interesting things that happened when brother-in-law and sister met. Tang Ran slowly recalled some things between her and Tang Guo. Actually, after she became sensible, she suddenly realized what kind of role her sister played in this world. However, when it happened, she was still too young. Coupled with her fear, she selectively ignored it. It was only when she went to university that she realized what her sister had done. Although I don't know how she did it, this is her sister. Wenma was already certain that the demon angel was Tang Guo. They did not have a huge organization, and she was alone. So, how did she manage to do those things in different places in one night? Unless she was a god. Wen Imo was suddenly stunned. If he could be reborn, then what about Tang Guo? She might have miracles. He didn't think too much about it. He just felt a little sorry for this world. One day, when Imo went back to see his father, Wen Heng, and suddenly found that Wen Heng was drowning his sorrows in alcohol, looking very depressed. Dad, did you hear that there's another difficult case in the bureau? At this moment, Wen Heng was already in his 60s. His body was still considered healthy. Even though he had retired, he often paid attention to the situation of the cases in the bureau. In the end, it was naturally Demon Angel. No. Wen Heng shook his head and took a sip of wine before saying, the Demon Angel hasn't appeared for 3 years. Hearing this, Wen Imo calmed down. He had already been dead for 3 years, so how could he appear again? The brightest things were always short-lived. Dad, don't be sad. Maybe he will appear again in the future. No, he won't appear again. The demon angel won't appear again, Wen Heng said drunkenly. Wen Heng said drunkenly, yesterday, the bureau received a case. An 8-year-old girl was thrown into a smelly ditch. After the autopsy, Wen Heng covered his face and cried softly. He did not continue speaking. If the demon angel was here, he might have discovered it long ago and saved a little life. Wen Heng took another sip of wine. Wen Imo didn't say anything. But she was no longer here. Before Tang Guo opened her eyes, she smelled countless flowers around her. When she opened her eyes, she saw countless flowers surrounding her. Facing a lake, it was very beautiful. Soon, she realized her situation. She buried her head. She was sitting in a wheelchair. She tried to stand up, and as expected, her legs couldn't exert any strength. She said self-deprecatingly, "Why is it that my character is either blind, miserable, or dead without a burial place?" The system said weakly, "It must be the evil law of the supporting female lead. I believe that the host will be able to make a comeback. Your little Tongzi will always be by your side. I want to chat with more like-minded people about transmigration. Female lead, calm down. Talk about life, find a confidant peak." Chapter 2198. "Alright, stop sucking up to me," Tangguo replied in amusement as she continued to observe her surroundings. Through her eyes and the system's scan of her surroundings, she had a basic understanding of her current environment. This should be a very luxurious manor, and this body looked very young. At least she could tell from her pair of slender white fingers that she was not very old. She was probably only 16 years old. Through the system's scan, there were a few bodyguards standing not too far away from her. They looked like they were here to protect her. Beside her stood a woman who looked to be in her 30s. Based on her aura and attire, she was most likely a helper to take care of her. Therefore, her family background should be quite good. She was indeed a female supporting character. She heard that female supporting characters with good family backgrounds did not have a good ending. In that case, she wanted to see what was so bad about this ending. Just as Tangguo was about to close her eyes to receive the memories, a white ball suddenly ran over from afar and threw itself into her arms. This cat was snow white and did not look fat. Instead, it looked very healthy. It jumped onto Tangguo's lap and stared at her with its round eyes. The human and cat stared at each other for about a minute before the cat finally yawned and fell asleep on her lap. Not long after, Tangguo heard snoring. "Dear host, this cat seems to like you very much." Tangguo looked at the white cat on her lap again. She touched its back and smoothed its fur. Its snores seemed to be getting louder and louder. She heard that this was a sign that it was very comfortable. She gently rubbed the back of its neck. It seemed to enjoy it very much and lay down even more, even its ears were pressed down. "Miss, should we take Chucho away?" Su Qing, the helper, asked. This was Mrs. Pet, so she did not take it away directly. She was also not afraid that the cat would disturb Mississippi. It could be said that Miss liked this white cat very much. It would often rush over from the side and jump onto Miss's lap. Miss would always smooth its fur. However, this cat was a little different today. It did not sleep with its fur, but directly fell asleep on Miss's lap. It seemed to be more clingy to Mississippi. Of course, Su Qing didn't think too much about it. He only thought that the relationship between the man and the cat had improved. "No need, I'll just hug it and sleep for a while." Tangguo lowered the back of the wheelchair a little and turned the wheelchair into a recliner. It just so happened that there was some warm sun at the moment. Lying in the garden with the cat in her arms and facing the lake to sleep under the sun sounded good. Su Qing naturally did not dare to object and continued to wait at the side. To be able to work as a helper in the family Tang manor, the lowest salary would be 20,000 yuan a month. The owner of the family Tang manor would also sell pension insurance for everyone who worked in the manor. As long as you don't make any mistakes, you can work here for the rest of your life. At the same time, if they got married, their children would be able to attend a private school run under the family Tang's name, and they would be exempted from the expensive tuition and miscellaneous fees. If he was chosen by the owner of family Tang Group, it was not impossible for him to work in the family Tang Group in the future. To work in the manor, the most important thing was to know how to look at the owner's face, especially the most beloved and only daughter of the owner of the family Tang Group, the princess of the family Tang Group. Peak. Chapter 2199. Su Qing was also very excited to be assigned to take care of this little princess. The main thing was that the little princess had a good temper and was not difficult to serve. She was easier to get along with than many people outside. She was very quiet. She felt that she was really lucky to be able to take care of her. At this time, Tanggua had already closed her eyes to receive the memories. She did not notice that the cat in her arms had opened its eyes and was staring at her with a pair of beautiful brown eyes. Su Qing also did not notice that the cat had been staring at Tanggua. After an unknown amount of time, the white cat stretched out its claws and grabbed the two snow-white breasts. It hugged Tanggua and lay down to sleep again. In the human world where cats could not be seen, human eyes could not tell what the cat was thinking at this time. Tanggua had slowly integrated the plot of this world. The manor she was in belonged to the family Tang. Her father was a very capable person. Her mother was not a very glorious person. Back then, she approached her father for the family Tang property. Before meeting her father, her mother had been in countless relationships because she was not a well-behaved woman. The men she dated were all rich and noble. They always wanted to make a fortune or marry into a rich family and become a wife. Unfortunately, these men were all fickle. They had wives of equal social status at home. They looked for women outside just to find excitement. It was just a toy. How could they take it seriously? She had secretly gotten pregnant several times. In the end, she was taken to a private hospital by the other party's wife and people to force her to abort. The wives of the rich families were all endlessly scheming. The rich families controlled most of the world's resources. Even if they were wrong in this matter, they should not have done it. It was even illegal. But in front of them, the law was not worth mentioning. And her mother did not have the ability to make trouble with them because her identity was not glorious. She did not know how many mothers she had. Anyway, she had a very annoying general term, mistress. Because of several abortions, her mother was no longer pregnant. She was eager to find a man who could give her a good life once and for all. So, she schemed against the owner of the family Tang. She was interested in Tang Yunfeng's wealth, ability, and status. She was also interested in the fact that Tang Yunfeng had been single for most of his life without a wife. She was also interested in Tang Yunfeng's age. At that time, Tang Yunfeng was almost 50 years old, and she was still young. By the time her child grew up, Tang Yunfeng would have already been buried. Moreover, with Tang Yunfeng's physical condition, he might not be able to live that long. After he died and she was pregnant with his child, wouldn't the entire Tang family's assets belong to her? She was indeed lucky to have met Tang Yunfeng in this lifetime. Later on, when she got pregnant with Tang Yunfeng's child, she might have borrowed the luck of her next lifetime. Sure enough, the reason why Tang Yunfeng didn't have a child was because of his own body. The doctor had long determined that he might not have a child in his life, but they didn't rule out the possibility of an accident. In order to have a child, he had thought of countless ways. After all, he had so much property, he had to have a child to inherit it. This was all his hard work. Therefore, he had many women, but he had signed a contract with them from the beginning. No matter who they were, as long as they gave birth to his child, regardless of whether it was a boy or a girl, he would let them live a carefree life. The only requirement was that they were obedient. Vertex. Chapter 2200. As for those who didn't give birth to a child, he would terminate the contract with them and compensate them with a sum of money and a house. These women were all carefully selected by him. So it was said that the original owner's mother was really lucky to have been chosen. In the end, with her condition, she was pregnant. It really made people feel like they were burning incense. Since the original owner's mother got pregnant, Tang Yunfeng did as he said before and terminated the contract with all the women. He also gave them generous compensation and no one objected. The original owner's mother thought that she was going to be promoted. Even if Tang Yunfeng didn't mention marriage, she wasn't in a hurry. After all, she was the only person in the world who was pregnant with Tang Yunfeng's child. But when the child was born, she didn't get Tang Yunfeng's promise to marry her. Instead, he gave her a luxurious villa and promised to give her 500,000 yuan a month as pocket money. For this, it was actually more than enough. But she wasn't satisfied. Tang Yunfeng didn't stop her from seeing the child, but he had the final say on how to raise the child and how to educate it. The original owner's mother was never satisfied. Especially since she didn't become Mrs. Tang and the child wasn't close to her. She didn't get anything and she didn't know how others laughed at her. But she didn't know that many people envied her. Marrying Tang Yunfeng, no one thought about it. Being able to have a child with him was the lifelong dream of many women. In the eyes of outsiders, having a child was equal to having everything. Why bother so much and insist on being Mrs. Tang? The reason why she said so much was because the original owner's disability was caused by her mother. Later on, she became crazier and didn't like the original owner. Because every time she came to see the original owner, she said that she wanted the original owner to help her and the original owner's father, Tang Yunfeng, get married. The original owner could distinguish right from wrong and was very smart. She was very sensible at a young age. After all, she was raised as the successor by Tang Yunfeng. How could he listen to her slanderous words? Most importantly, she didn't treat the original owner well. How could a child not feel it? The original owner didn't agree and later angered her. One day, a crazy idea appeared in her mind. She wanted to destroy the original owner that Tang Yunfeng was proud of. She took the original owner out. No matter how bad she was, no one thought that she would harm the original owner. While shopping, she pushed the original owner off the bridge and onto the road. Unexpectedly, the original owner subconsciously grabbed her. In the end, the original owner's legs were crippled, and she was hit by a car and died. Perhaps this was retribution. She wanted to destroy the original owner, but she lost her life and didn't get anything. At that time, this matter was still very big. Of course, this was the first tragedy of the original owner. What happened next was her second tragedy. Although her life was saved, her legs were crippled. When the accident happened, she was 12 years old. It had been 4 years since then. However, her body had always been weak, so Tang Yunfeng's dream of being the successor fell through. Although his daughter was disabled, her body was still weak. Tang Yunfeng's attitude towards her didn't change at all. Instead, he cherished her even more and treated her even better. Now that he was in his 60s, he was most worried about his daughter's future. With him around, he could take good care of his daughter. If his daughter's body wasn't so weak, even if her legs were disabled, she could still be the heir. Vertex. Chapter 2201. But her body couldn't be too tired. He was worried that when he wasn't in this world, she would be bullied. He was her only family and she had been hurt by another family member. So, what would his daughter do in the future? In the end, Tang Yunfeng decided to find a husband for his daughter. Tang Yunfeng had already made this decision half a year after the previous host's accident. He planned to choose a group of youths to test and then train them carefully. This person not only needed to be smart, they also needed to have skills and couldn't be cold. In short, the conditions were very harsh. The person who won in the end would be trained by him. Of course, while he was alive, if he wasn't satisfied with that person, he could eliminate them at any time. The most important condition was that the person had to be liked by the previous host. This was the most difficult condition. How could these youths make the previous host like them? At the time, The previous host knew that her legs were crippled, and adding on the fact that it was her family that had done it to her, she had always been in a depressed and silent state. In this state, it was hard not to make her unhappy. But Tang Yunfeng had set the previous host's trial as the last one. In all the previous trials, there were 5 youths that had won. After all, there were countless smart people in this world. Tang Yunfeng didn't find it strange that these 5 youths had won. And the last trial was the previous host's trial. The only one she approved of was Qin Ting, who was the male lead of this world. At the time, the other youths had all tried to show themselves, trying to make the previous host see them. But only Qin Ting didn't seem to have a strong purpose and paid more attention to her mental communication. That was why she approved of him and wasn't that anxious. Of course, another point was that Qin Ting was honest enough. He told the previous host that he had his own purpose for participating in the election. He didn't know if he would like her in the future, but he would see. If there was a day that he couldn't like her, then he would give up everything. But before that, he would use the power of his family Tang to do what he wanted to do. It was because of this honesty that the previous host spoke. What do you want to use my father's power to do? Revenge for my parents. Although my family couldn't compare to a little princess like you, it wasn't bad in this world. But they worked together to kill my parents. Other than coming here, I couldn't think of any other way. Don't worry, whether I like you or not in the future, the family Tang is yours. I just want to borrow it, and I will do what I promised and take care of you forever. Then, the two became familiar with each other. It was Qin Ting that helped the original owner walk out of the psychological shadow and smile again. Tang Yunfeng also knew what he said and appreciated this young man's honesty and tactfulness. Even if this young man didn't fall in love with his daughter in the future, he was willing to use half of his family's property in exchange for the other party's care for his daughter. Based on his honest thoughts, he should be trustworthy. If there were no other accidents along the way, everything would be within Tang Yunfeng's expectations. Unfortunately, there would always be all kinds of people's SS Dang was Tang's SS Tang's TSTS SST Tang's. The female lead only appeared after the two of them got married. Qin TTSSTA. TTTS. NTTS of STS there. Chapter 2202. The previous host was very much looking forward to this wedding. But before the wedding, Tang Yunfeng found Qin Ting alone. Qin Ting, it's not too late to back out now. You know that my body can't go on. No matter how carefully you take care of me, it won't last more than a few years. Maybe one day I'll pass away. The only thing I can't let go of is Xiaoguo. You knew my goal from the beginning. If you marry Xiaoguo now, then you won't have a chance to back out in the future. No matter what, you can't abandon her or betray her. You have to take care of her for the rest of your life and be good to her. Xiaoguo likes you a lot. Maybe you don't like her that much, but if you agree, I believe you can take care of her. If you're against it, then leave immediately. I won't pursue it and Xiaoguo won't either. Qin Ting's choice was, Uncle Qin, I'm willing to take care of Xiaoguo for the rest of my life. Don't worry, I won't betray her. What Qin Ting said at the time was true. After being together for so long, although he didn't love the previous host deeply, he still liked her. Maybe this liking was a bit faint, but he still liked her. He thought that everything was perfect right now. The previous host wasn't bad and it would be good to live together for the rest of their lives. In the end, the two got married. A year later, Tang Yunfeng passed away and Qin Ting took over the family Tang company. The company flourished under his management. He was very good to the previous host, but the two always treated each other with respect. The outside world didn't know that they weren't a real couple. The previous host's legs were inconvenient and she was only 18 when she got married. Enchanting didn't mention it and she didn't know how to mention it. Maybe she felt that he didn't like her that much, so she didn't mention it. They lived like this for many years. It wasn't until Enchanting was 30 that the previous host asked him if there was something missing at home. If they could have a child, that would be great. Actually, she didn't care if they had a child or not. It was just that after being married for so many years, they were still the same as before. Even if Enchanting did take good care of her. That kind of distant feeling made her feel very uncomfortable. Even if he really didn't want to take it a step further, he should have just made it clear. However, he was only gentle to her and didn't care about other women. Enchanting's reply was, "Xiaogua, your body is so weak. Why don't we adopt a child when we have the chance?" The body of the original owner was indeed not suitable for giving birth to children. It might take her life. She didn't intend to give birth to children. Her father let her live well and paved so many roads for her. How could she disappoint her father's expectations? She just wanted to ask, was this the only way they could be together? It had been so many years, neither cold nor hot. Enchanting's reply made her dispel any thoughts of continuing the conversation. In the beginning, he did want to adopt a child, but after picking and choosing, he always felt that something was missing. There was nothing that satisfied him. Later on, he inadvertently heard about surrogacy and became interested. After understanding the situation, he decided to use his seed to find someone to give birth to a child for him. He would bring it back and tell the original owner that it was his adopted child. The reason why he didn't take the original owner's egg was because her body was too weak. Taking it would be very harmful to her body. Moreover, with her condition, it might be taken more than once. That would be very harmful to her. Moreover, they hadn't officially become husband and wife. He was afraid that mentioning this would anger the original owner. He originally wanted to get close to her, but he still felt that something was wrong. In short, success couldn't come naturally. He didn't show himself the whole time. Everything was done by sending people. He only knew that his subordinates helped him choose a girl with good character, good looks, and decent education. She was a female student who had just graduated from a key university. Moreover, she had a clean background and didn't have a boyfriend. He did this because something happened to his family and he needed money. Coincidentally, this surrogacy woman was the female lead. Her name was Bai Ruyu. The Peak. Chapter 2203. Bai Ruyu was brought to a very luxurious place. Of course, this place was very quiet. Although this place looked very luxurious, she was a person who couldn't see the light of day. She had never thought that she would one day become someone's lover. After Bai Ruyu became pregnant, she didn't see Enchanting's appearance clearly because they always met in the dark. Actually, the story of this world didn't start with the original owner's parents. Her parents were basically living in the gossip of others. After all, the female lead of this world was Bai Ruyu and the male lead was Enchanting. The story started with Bai Ruyu. The story started with Bai Ruyu's family having a big problem and urgently needing a large sum of money. Originally, her family wanted to introduce her to a big boss. Those big bosses were either old or ugly. Of course, Bai Ruyu wasn't willing to do that. While she still had time, she thought of many ways. In the end, she inadvertently found out about this matter and became Enchanting's lover. After giving birth to the child, Bai Ruyu's family's difficulties were gradually solved in the next few years. Because of that matter, she missed a good job opportunity and found a very ordinary job. She could barely get by. But all these years, she missed the child she had been pregnant with for 10 months, the child she had only taken one look at. She even regretted being someone else's lover. She couldn't even raise the child by her side. If she could do it all over again, she definitely wouldn't give up on her child. No matter what, she would take her away. Why didn't she make an agreement with the other party? Perhaps she could have continued to live in that place and visit it occasionally. She could have given up on her status. Ruyu sank into a state of guilt and denial. Often, when she wasn't busy, she would sit in the park in a daze. This was because during the weekends, there would be countless adults bringing their children to the park. Looking at those lively and cute children, she couldn't help but miss her own child. Was it the same? At this time, a child accidentally fell in front of her. She subconsciously picked up the child. This child didn't cry or make a fuss. A pair of sparkling eyes looked at her without saying anything. It looked somewhat cold. Even so, she felt that this child was very close to her. She subconsciously glanced at the child's neck, and what she saw made her freeze on the spot. Because there was a black mole on the side of the child's neck. She clearly remembered the location of this mole. If it wasn't the child she had given birth to, who else could it be? At that time, after she gave birth to the child, she was very tired, but her heart was very clear. Taking advantage of the time she took to look at the child, she randomly looked for characteristics of the child, and finally found that this mole was the most special. Because this mole was slightly bigger and had a certain shape, she remembered it very clearly. She must have used her life to remember it. Ruyu cried tears of joy. She looked at her child and opened her mouth, but she didn't know what to say. Judging from this child's attire, he must be rich and respectable. If she said anything rashly, it would definitely cause a lot of trouble. Therefore, she decided to get along with this child first before slowly finding out more information about him. Perhaps due to the nature of mother and son, even though the child didn't speak much, he didn't reject Ruyu. The mother and son were only separated when the person taking care of the child found him. Afterwards, Ruyu thought of a way to find out the child's identity. At the same time, she learned that Enchanting was looking for someone to take care of the child. Chapter 2204. Last time, when the child almost ran away and left people's sight, it was because the person who took care of him was lazy. Of course, not everyone had the opportunity to come. First, one had to have a university degree or above. At the same time, they had to be patient and careful. It was best if they had some talent and knew how to take care of children. Ruyu prepared for this for a long time and finally got the job as she wished. She came to the child's side. The original owner had been cold to this child from the very beginning. Although she didn't care about the family company, she still held the majority of the shares. Before Tang Yunfeng left, he saw Enchanting's potential and was afraid that he would go back on his words and his daughter would be bullied. So, he transferred most of the shares to the original owner. He was also worried that Enchanting would be dissatisfied, so he gave him a small portion of the shares, hoping that he would keep his word. If it wasn't a last resort, he would never do this. It wasn't that he didn't think about the younger generation of the people he knew, but these families were all big families. Not to mention the rules, there were also many people. Even if his good friend could take care of his daughter for a while, but for a lifetime. Living in such a big family, it was inevitable that there would be many conflicts. Especially the little princess who lost her father and had a weak body and crippled legs. Think about what would happen in the future. Enchanting went to find someone to give birth to his child. The original owner didn't know the truth for long and watched everything happen. But Enchanting found a surrogate and didn't find another woman. For the time being, she still accepted it, so she closed one eye and didn't care about it. When the child came back, when she thought that it was Enchanting's child with another woman, how could she be intimate with it? She was cold to everything. Enchanting also found that the original owner wasn't intimate with the child at all and didn't intend to care about it. Maybe no matter what promise, it couldn't be compared to someone who was related to him by blood. Because the original owner didn't care about the child and was cold, Enchanting also became cold to her. There was even some estrangement in his heart. Although the relationship between the two was no different from before, Enchanting had always done well in this aspect. Everyone thought that he was infatuated. If he wasn't infatuated, why didn't he have a woman by his side and was only willing to guard the family Tang's little princess? How could the outside world know the sadness and grievance of the original owner? It was precisely because she liked Enchanting that she could only be sad by herself. The education she had received since she was a child prevented her from acting like an ordinary woman and making a scene at her own husband. She could only feel depressed in her heart and quietly watch everything from the side. Looking at the interaction between Enchanting and the child, she suddenly understood. If Enchanting only wanted one child, it was nothing. As long as the two of them lived under the same roof, living together for the rest of their lives was not a bad idea. She did not know how long she could live in this life. However, just as she was about to slowly accept the child, Bai Ruyu came to take care of the child. Of course, when Bai Ruyu moved into this manor, many things happened, including her unintentional ambiguous relationship with Enchanting. Basically, it was the original owner who sat upstairs and watched the two of them play with the child and the flowers. This made the original owner very uncomfortable. Especially one day, she heard Bai Ruyu secretly saying that she regretted it. Only then did she understand the truth. Bai Ruyu was the child's biological mother. At that time, the burning pain in her heart was indescribable. Vertex. Chapter 2205. After knowing the truth, the host didn't find Bai Ruyu, Enchanting, and that child pleasing to the eye. She became evil and her heart started to distort. She would pick on Bai Ruyu, but she was very unlucky. Every time, she would be caught by Enchanting. Bai Ruyu's pitiful appearance should be pitiful. At first, Enchanting didn't pay attention to Bai Ruyu. He only thought that she got along well with the child. But that child couldn't bear to see anyone bully Bai Ruyu. Anyone who bullied Bai Ruyu would be bullied. Every time the host picked on Bai Ruyu, Enchanting would catch her. A large part of the reason was that the child would secretly snitch on her. Of course, his snitching wasn't direct. He only called Enchanting to come home and said that he missed his father. The conflict intensified, especially when the child almost lost his life. Fortunately, Bai Ruyu sacrificed herself to save him. The plot reached its climax. Enchanting also treated Bai Ruyu differently. His impression of her improved. Later on, the two gradually became familiar with each other. The host became more and more evil. Bai Ruyu asked about Enchanting and the host by chance. At that time, Enchanting unexpectedly said, "I don't have any feelings for her. Marrying her was a promise." Bai Ruyu didn't approve of a marriage without feelings. She didn't know the real reason behind it and fiercely criticized Enchanting's thoughts. Enchanting slowly discovered Bai Ruyu's uniqueness and gradually became interested in her. Of course, he didn't show it. But the sensitive host quickly sensed it. Every time Enchanting wasn't around, Bai Ruyu would suffer. Enchanting, who was interested in Bai Ruyu, couldn't be as calm as before. He finally couldn't bear it and stood against the host. Time slowly passed. The conflict between the two couldn't be resolved. Enchanting realized how important Bai Ruyu was to him. He regretted agreeing to marry the host. But at the same time, he felt guilty. After all, he had promised to take care of the host. He started to secretly prepare to leave the family in the future. His enemies hadn't been eliminated yet because they were very powerful. They had been slowly devouring them over the years. If he secretly established his power, it might be more beneficial for him to take revenge. When the original owner finally couldn't take it anymore and told Enchanting to get out, he turned around and left, leaving everything behind. Because at this time, his wings were fully grown, and he no longer needed family tang. After he left with the child and Bai Ruyu, the original owner almost went crazy. After that, she repeatedly targeted Bai Ruyu. Enchanting couldn't take it anymore and directly destroyed the company under the family Tang's name. After a long time, he walked into this somewhat dilapidated manor. He saw that the flowers in the manor had withered, the grass had withered, and the water in the lake was dirty. The original owner was sitting by the lake. She was so quiet that her distorted face had returned to its original state. At that time, Enchanting said, "I promised to take care of you for the rest of your life. You also promised that you would never betray me in this lifetime. I'm sorry. I didn't expect someone so important to me to appear in my life. Enchanting, since you've broken your promise, then don't pretend to be a good person. The family Tang's downfall is all because of you. You are just an ungrateful villain. Don't you think it's funny that the people outside are evaluating you as being extremely benevolent?" Vertex. Chapter 2206. Enchanting said that he would take the previous owner away and arrange for someone to take care of her. The previous owner told him to come tomorrow and he agreed. He thought that she missed the old things and wanted to stay for one more day. The previous owner made a request for him to bring Bai Ruyu along. Enchanting wasn't afraid that she would cause any trouble as there was no one left in the manor. She couldn't even walk, so what could she do? He didn't expect that the previous owner would burn down the manor in front of him and Bai Ruyu the next day. She had already sprinkled gasoline all over the place and it would ignite at the slightest touch. "Enchanting, Bai Ruyu, are human blood buns tasty? Betrayal is betrayal. Cheating is cheating. I want you to watch me die in front of you." The previous owner's goal was achieved. Bai Ruyu would often dream of that scene. Even if everyone said that the previous owner wasn't good, she and Enchanting were the best match. But she knew that the previous owner's tragedy was due to her appearance. She had nightmares all year round and her body was in a bad condition. But she was much more fortunate than the previous owner. Even if she was afraid, she could be hugged by her lover and enjoy his warmth. Tangguo opened her eyes and sighed softly. This sigh caused the white cat in her embrace to open its eyes. She lowered her eyes and met its beautiful eyes. The white cat yawned lazily and lay on her lap to sleep. The sun had already risen high in the sky. Su Qing bent down and said softly, "Young miss, the sun is too bright. Do you want to go inside?" Su Qing pushed Tangguo back into the house. After checking for a while, she returned to her room. As for the white cat, it was still on her lap and didn't seem to have woken up. Tangguo didn't care about it and allowed it to sleep on her lap. Su Qing was afraid that Tangguo would be tired and suggested to put the white cat in the cat bed. He reached out to hug the cat, but the cat seemed to have realized something and growled at Su Qing. Su Qing retreated in fright and felt helpless. Tangguo stroked the cat's head and carried it. This time, it didn't resist. She placed it on the bed and said, "Chio Chio, sleep here." The cat looked at the bed and seemed to be very satisfied. Then, it lay down and fell asleep. Su Qing wanted to say something, but then he remembered how much Tangguo liked this cat. At most, he would ask someone to change the bedding twice. Tangguo stayed in her room reading for the whole morning. After lunch, Su Qing asked her if she wanted to go out today. Tangguo rejected the idea. She didn't want to go out for the time being. Tang Yunfeng and Qin Ting were both very busy and would only come back to accompany her for dinner at night. When it was almost time for dinner, Tang Guo was already sitting at the table, waiting. Tang Yunfeng and Qin Ting finally came back. Tang Yunfeng took a second look at Tang Guo when he saw her. He walked up to her and touched her head. He lowered his voice and said, "Did something good happen today?" Xiao Guo must be in a good mood. "Nothing good happened, but Dad, I'm in a good mood." "System, are you sure it's not the excitement of anger?" Because he could abuse scum again. Although Tang Yunfeng was already in his 60s, he still maintained his appearance very well. Even his white hair had been dyed, making him look much younger. He was also quite tall. Not to mention that he must have been handsome when he was young. Even at this age, he was charming and could attract countless women. His figure was slightly thin. After all, his body wasn't very good. No matter how careful he was and how well he protected his appearance, his body couldn't keep up. The weakness on the inside was the most fatal. Qin Ting only smiled at Tang Guo and chose to sit beside her. During the meal, he would help her put food in her bowl. This scene looked very harmonious. Peak. Chapter 2207. After dinner, Tang Yunfeng would accompany the original owner to watch TV programs every day. This was a time that both father and daughter liked very much. While watching TV, they would chat a little. As for the original owner's academic problems, she would invite a teacher to teach her at home. As Tang Yunfeng's daughter, even if her body was not good and her legs were disabled, she could not be lazy and not study. He did not want his daughter to become a fool. As for why she was so free today, it was because today was her rest time. Basically, she studied for 5 days and rested for 1 day. If she was healthy, she would definitely not be so relaxed. She would probably be busier than Qin Ting now. Qin Ting was 3 years older than her and was now 19. Qin Ting sat with them for a while and said that he would go back to the study to read. He and Tang Guo did not deliberately develop anything in their relationship. This was also one of the things that Tang Yunfeng was satisfied with. He was serious about learning and did not slack off because of the family Tang's little princess. Anyway, he thought that living under the same roof, it was better for their relationship to develop slowly. His daughter was only 16 years old now. Thinking of this, Tang Yunfeng felt a little regretful. If he could live to 80 years old, he would not have to worry about this. "Have you scanned my father's body?" "Yes, host." "His body is indeed damaged. It is probably because of a major operation." The original owner probably didn't know about this either. "What kind of surgery?" "Heart surgery." "After my accurate scan, host, your father should have had a new heart. Now the function of the heart is getting worse, so the doctor is helpless. It's impossible for him to do it again. With the current medical standards and Tang Yunfeng's physical condition, it's impossible for him to undergo another surgery. Moreover, this kind of major surgery is full of uncertainties, and there's also a rejection period. Anyway, he can only wait for death. What if I insist on keeping him alive?" Tang Guo sat beside Tang Yunfeng, her eyes glued to the TV and the system's words. The system said weakly, "As long as you are happy. Anyway, the King of Hell does not dare to snatch people from host. The King of Hell does not dare to snatch people from me. I want to save many people. But why can I only extend my life by 20 years each time?" What Tang Guo didn't say was that in the small world, the only thing she couldn't change was her own life. In the beginning, she couldn't even change the lifespan of the main characters. After that, it was the guy who had been following her through the transmigration. She had no way of prolonging his life. But now, other than herself, she had a way to extend everyone's lifespan. Another important point was that the person who was very cruel to her would always wait for her to die before dying. She wasn't even sure if he would die first and recover his memories to set a luxurious forbidden package for himself after she died, or if he would recover his memories first before dying. If that host doesn't know, then I definitely don't know either. Tang Guo didn't delve into this matter. She didn't care about it at all. What she needed to consider now was how she could prolong Tang Yunfeng's life openly. It would be a pity for such a good father to die too early. It was better to live a long, long life. If the original owner was here, she would probably hope that the only family member she cherished could live a little longer. Vertex. Chapter 2208. Of course, since Tang Yunfeng wanted to live, he couldn't stop things from happening. If things didn't happen, how could she create dregs? Xiao Guo, do you want to sleep? Tang Yunfeng noticed that Tang Guo was distracted. He waved his hand in front of her eyes and patted her head. He smiled and said, "If you're tired, then go to sleep. We still have a busy day tomorrow." Tang Guo had already thought of a way. She said, "Dad, when are you free?" "Why? Do you want Dad to accompany you at home?" Tang Yunfeng laughed, but he wasn't impatient at all. He only wanted to give her the best things. "In that case, Dad will try to be busy for the next few days and take a day or two to accompany you, okay?" When Tang Yunfeng said that he was busy, he meant that he wouldn't be free all day and would be busy until late at night. After all, he was managing such a big company. No matter how many capable people he had, there were still many things that he needed to deal with. Just sitting on the sofa and reading documents could be done from morning to night. "I just want to go out with Dad. It's boring to be cooped up at home all the time." Tang Guo emphasized, "Only Dad and I will go out." Tang Yunfeng understood the meaning behind her words. His precious daughter only wanted to go out with him alone and didn't want to bring Enchanting along. Tang Yunfeng didn't think too much about it. He only thought that he had been too busy recently and was eager to nurture Enchanting, so he neglected his little baby. "Okay, Xiao Guo, when do you want to go?" "Tomorrow." Tang Yunfeng was a little stunned. Then, seeing Tang Guo's expectant look, he finally gritted his teeth and agreed. It just so happened that he could also test Enchanting. Later, he would ask his assistant to arrange for the meeting to be cancelled. Tomorrow's meeting wasn't very important, so it shouldn't be a problem to postpone it. Ever since his daughter's accident, Tang Yunfeng didn't throw himself into the company so desperately. What he cared about the most wasn't the company, but his daughter. Tang Guo was a little happy. Then she would have to make arrangements tonight. "Xiao Guo, where do you want to go?" "Dad, let's go to the temple. I heard that there are eminent monks there. Let's go there to worship Buddha." Tang Yunfeng pondered for a moment and felt that something was off, so he asked, "Why did you suddenly want to go to the temple?" "Dad's health is getting worse and worse recently, but he doesn't cherish it. I want to go and pray to Buddha and ask him to bless my dad with health and longevity." Tang Yunfeng felt that his daughter seemed to be afraid that he would leave this world. Other than the fact that he had undergone a major operation, he did not hide his physical condition from the original owner. As for that major surgery, he had already done it when he was young. Perhaps he didn't mean to hide it, but he just felt that there was no need to say it. The doctor did a checkup this year and gave him the verdict that he had at most 5 years left to live. Therefore, he had to die within the next 5 years. Perhaps he didn't even have 5 years. The doctor said that it was uncertain. He could die tomorrow. He had to be prepared so that his daughter would not be alone in the future. Tang Yunfeng had mixed feelings and didn't know what to say. Late at night, Tangwa used a teleportation talisman to go to the temple. She created a dream for that very famous eminent monk. This eminent monk was not a true eminent monk, but he really did have a good understanding of Buddhism. Many people with some psychological problems could be alleviated by him. Over time, he became an eminent monk. Of course, that was not the only reason. She wanted to create a dream for the eminent monk. A noble person would come tomorrow. As long as he persuaded this noble person to rest well, come to the temple often, and recite Buddhist scriptures, he would be able to extend his life. System: Hey, didn't the host want her father to become a monk? My dad misses me and doesn't have the qualifications to become a monk. There's no other way. He can't just recover from his illness for no reason and live a long life. Everyone believes in Buddhism, so he also believes in Buddhism. Extending his life won't be a problem. System: Okay. Top point. Chapter 2209. The next morning at breakfast, Qin Ting heard Tang Yunfeng say that he was going to take Tang Gua out to play and accompany her. He told him to go to the company alone and even gave him some important things to do. Qin Ting didn't suspect anything at all. He thought that Tang Yunfeng was testing his ability by giving him such important things to do. He had been by Tang Yunfeng's side for more than 3 years and naturally knew that the other party's health was getting worse, even though on the surface he looked healthier than many people. However, he would occasionally hear some rumors from Tang Yunfeng's close subordinates. Based on the other party's wholehearted training over the years, Qin Ting would do well. At this time, Qin Ting really didn't think too much. In his heart, he was grateful to Tang Yunfeng for giving him this opportunity and taking care of Tang Gua. Even if he didn't like her that much, he would still treat her well. It was just that as they got busy, they had less time to spend together. Uncle Tang and Xiao Gua have fun, Qin Ting said lightly. Qin Ting said faintly. His personality was like this. Tang Yunfeng didn't care. In his heart, Qin Ting was a man who did things. Qin Ting left first, and the driver took him to the company. After that, Tang Gua finished eating, picked a beautiful dress to wear, and was carried to the wheelchair by Su Qing. Tang Yunfeng looked at the white cat in Tang Gua's arms and felt a little helpless. Do you want to bring this cat? It's quite pitiful to leave it alone at home. Dad, just bring Chiu along. It doesn't make a fuss and just likes to sleep by my side. It won't affect anything. Tang Yunfeng naturally wouldn't refuse. Okay then. You're becoming more and more attentive to this cat now. Because I'm the only one in its world. Of course I have to be more attentive to it, Tang Gua replied with a smile and was pushed into the car along with her wheelchair. Several of the cars in her family were custom-made by Tang Yunfeng from the car company. They weren't modified. In any case, they were most suitable for people like her who were in a wheelchair. The top of the tallest mountain in the city was directly connected to the road, so it wasn't difficult to drive up. It was said that the monks of this temple were the ones who built this road. The road wasn't smooth at the beginning, so driving was still dangerous. Later on, some wealthy businessmen who believed in Buddhism inadvertently came here for a tour and met the senior monk in the temple. After being enlightened by the senior monk, their luck changed and they believed that all of this was the credit of the senior monk. Therefore, he spent a large sum of money to renovate the temple for the senior monks and help them expand it. The senior monk rejected this suggestion and asked him to help build the road instead. The reason was that there were guests coming from all directions all year round. It was not convenient to travel back and forth, and it was better to fix the road. Benefiting everyone was also benefiting the people of their temple. When the merchant heard this, he felt that it made sense and was even more impressed with the monk. Because there were many temples at the top of the mountain, the temples at the top of the mountain were usually very solemn and spacious. The road to the top of the mountain was very rugged. It was said that only by taking the rugged road could one show their sincerity. This senior monk didn't think so. If it wasn't for the fact that the road was difficult to travel, he wouldn't have mobilized all the monks to build this road. It was precisely because this path was not easy to walk, and it was very difficult to go up and down. Especially on rainy days, it was very easy to fall. The people in the temple had fallen 8 out of 10 times. Vertex. Chapter 22:10. Sometimes, they needed to collect all kinds of items from the foot of the mountain. In the end, they would fall. Not only would they be injured, but the items would also be scrapped. As for those visitors from afar, believing in Buddhism was a form of faith. It was to calm their hearts and have a clear conscience. It was also to atone for their sins and appease their souls. In the end, the road was not easy to walk on. They even fell and fractured their bones. In the long run, who would be willing to come to his temple to worship Buddha? There were many temples in the world, and his was not the only one. If the road was easy to walk on, guests from all over would come to his temple. The temple would be filled with incense, and the temple would continue to exist. It could be said that this monk was very far-sighted. It was convenient for the pilgrims, and it was also convenient for him. To be honest, he gave people a good impression. Even if he did not have any supreme powers, he was worthy of being called an accomplished monk. The car drove all the way to the parking lot not far from the temple. It was said that the accomplished monk had suggested building it. If one donated money for incense, the temple would even give out free parking tickets. When Tangwa saw the accomplished monk's information and some of the incidents, she felt that it was a waste of talent for him to be a monk. If he were to do business, he would definitely be a tycoon. Of course, everyone had their own aspirations. She was just saying. It was not easy to meet an accomplished monk, but there were always exceptions. For example, donate more money for incense. It was not that the accomplished monk was greedy for money. If one were to talk about how his reputation as an accomplished monk came about, it was not only because of what he said previously. All the income of his temple, other than the tax, the share of all the temple members, and the portion that was used to renovate the temple, was used for charity. Almost every year, this temple would organize monks to go down the mountain several times to help the poor and seriously ill. There were many young monks in the temple. They were all children that they had helped in the past. There was also a school in the temple. When they were of age, they could enter university or even renounce asceticism. Now, there were many people in the temple who had graduated from university. The surrounding food stalls belonged to people who were once poor and had serious illnesses in their families. This was all done by the accomplished monk. The higher-ups also approved of his actions. Not only could he help the poor and seriously ill families, but he could also increase their income. Everyone was happy to see this happen. Therefore, he was called an accomplished monk. Anyone who heard his story was willing to call him that. "Little master, we want to see Grand Master Hui Guang." Tang Yunfeng bowed very politely. Since he had come to other people's territory, of course, he had to do as the Romans do. Moreover, he had never rejected this place. He had also heard about the things that Master Hui Guang had done, and he had some admiration in his heart. Just the existence of a temple could change the living environment of countless people. It was indeed worthy of being called a master. The little monk in front of him was only about 10 years old. He hesitated for a moment and asked politely, "Do you have an appointment?" There were many people who wanted to see Master Hui Guang, so they had to make an appointment. They could even make an appointment online. If you don't want to wait, then donate more money and enjoy VIP treatment. Grand Master Hui Guang will use his own private time to meet these people. Tang Yunfeng didn't say anything. He directly took out a check from his wallet and handed it to the little monk in front of him. My name is Tang Yunfeng. This is the money I donated to the temple. Today, I brought my beloved daughter to see Master Hui Guang. Vertex. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.